IB Nation, Notre Dame fans from all over the world. We actually have fans from all over the world in our shows, Trevor, which I think is just freaking awesome. It just shows you the scope of Notre Dame fandom. And today, I'm actually in a good mood today, Trevor. I haven't been in a good mood in a very long time. And I woke up in a good mood today. And I'm ready to talk some football, man. And guys, we're going to do something a little different today. Don't worry. Don't worry. When I say different, that doesn't mean no buy, sell, hold today. We are going to do a buy, sell, hold today. If I said no buy, sell, hold, I think he might boycott, not do the show with me today. So we're doing a buy, sell, hold. But normally on Wednesday, we sort of do matchups with the upcoming opponent when we dive into different things. And I'll be honest, this is meant as no disrespect to West Virginia, to Virginia. That was disrespectful. I apologize. I love the state of Virginia. It's where I'm from. Went to high school there. My family lives there. Coached in the state of Virginia. Love Charlottesville. So that was not an intentional disrespect, nor is what I'm about to say. But, guys, there's not a whole lot else that we need to say about that game that we didn't say yesterday and that we won't say tomorrow. And I just felt like there was a lot more interesting things that we wanted to talk about. And I hope that you all feel the same way because, yes, Virginia's a team that Notre Dame can't overlook, Trevor, and they're a team that Notre Dame's going to have to come to play. I think they would beat Northern Illinois if they played head to head. So you got to look at it that way. But like the matchup is the matchup. When we dove into it yesterday, and we'll talk about keys tomorrow, there's just a lot more interesting stuff to discuss. And we're going to dive in today before we get into the buy, sell, hold. We're going to talk about a lot of the narratives that have popped up about the college football playoff rankings. And so we're going to dive into those. There's some Notre Dame related narratives that we're going to discuss and take on and challenge, and some Big Ten fans are probably not going to be happy with things we have to say. Some SEC fans certainly won't be happy with some things that we're going to say. And Big 12 fans are probably going to hate us after this, but there's a lot to discuss about the college football playoff rankings and just the things that we see and the narratives that are out there. And so we'll give our thoughts on those narratives. We'll talk about what we think the committee got right, what they think the committee got wrong. Now that we've been able to dive into it, look into. So like last night was sort of like a raw gut reaction. This is how we're feeling. We go on Penn State rants. This is meant to be more structured and like, look, these are the things that we think. We've been able to go through it. We've been able to dive into the resumes. And here's how we feel about things, Trevor. So I'm excited. And then when we're done with that, then we will dive right into the buy, sell, hold. We have some great submissions today. So I can't wait. Trevor, to get this going. But I have a feeling you might actually make me wait at least a couple minutes.
I do. Just a couple quick things. One, I love Wednesdays. I'm happy we're doing the buy, sell, hold. Brian's 100% correct. If there's no buy, sell, hold today, this would be a solo show. No, I'm just playing. But I am excited to jump into buy, sell, hold today. You guys know me. It's one of my favorite segments that we do here at Irish Breakdown. But before we jump in, Brian is absolutely correct. You guys know it by now, but I got to talk to you about our friends over at MyBookie. So it's a sports book. It's called MyBookie. And if you're anything like me and you throw in bets on really any sports game under the sun, then you're going to want to start partnering with MyBookie. So to get you started, they're super friendly. They're super nice to give you all the tools that you need to succeed. And what they're going to do for you is they're going to give you a deposit bonus. What you're going to do is when you sign up, you're going to use promo code IRISH, and that's going to double your deposit bonus. So, for example, if you do not know what that means, if you put in $10, MyBookie is going to give you $10 in bonus bets, which is awesome. There's going to be no better time to use that than tomorrow on MyBookie risk-free Thursdays, which I always use on Thursday night football games. So tomorrow night, the Philadelphia Eagles take on the Washington Commanders. The Washington Commanders do not have a good rushing defense. And if you know anything about the Philadelphia Eagles, Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts have been tearing it up together all season long. So be sure to check out MyBookie for the risk-free Thursday bets. Also, be sure to enroll in their loyalty rewards program. They're going to give you an extra cash just for placing bets. So be sure to check out MyBookie. They're the sports book that gives you control and rewards you for every moment of play. So, Brian, you talked about it in the beginning of the show, and there's a whole lot going on. Now, obviously, us college football fans know how important Tuesday evenings are in November, and especially us as Notre Dame fans, despite where Notre Dame comes in the rankings, there's things that happen above and below them that are going to have implications for the rest of the season. Now, there's a bunch of different narratives flying around out there. Oh, there's a Big Ten bias. They're disrespecting the SEC. Notre Dame's too high. Notre Dame's too low. The Northern Illinois loss. What about all those things? So today, Bryan, we wanted to come on here and talk about, I don't want to say debunking some of these narratives, but we always want to provide a little bit of context. That's what
engaging them. That's what it's engaging those narratives. That's really what it boils down to, Trevor. It's not here to because there's some validity to some of them. Some need to be completely debunked. Some need to lack nuance. So yeah, it's engaging them, I think, is the way that I want to. I don't want this to come across as like we're just here crushing everybody that can't then respond to us because they're not on our show.
Right.
It's an engagement. It's meant to be a fact-based discussion of those narratives, which we, enjoy doing.
Yeah. So. Yeah. I agree. There's definitely, we're going to cover a lot of different topics today. We're going to provide a lot of different context to some of the things that are going on, Notre Dame related and not Notre Dame related. But obviously, us here at Irish Breakdown, we're going to talk a lot about what implications these mean for Notre Dame and what it means for Notre Dame moving forward, what to expect. So it's going to be a fun show today, Bryan. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Trev, as I look at these different aspects of what we're going to discuss, and the first one is going to be, we're going to talk about the Notre Dame narratives first, and kind of why we think Notre Dame is where they are, but then also engaging in some of these narratives that are going around about Notre Dame. And the first one we want to engage in is this nonsense about Texas A&M. And listen, any fair conversation about Notre Dame needs to include Northern Illinois. No Notre Dame fan is going to be able to rightfully get away with, well, hey, listen, they're not the same team then. All right, cool. Well, if you're going to do that as a Notre Dame fan, then you also have to say, well, then you can't talk about the Texas A&M loss or win. You can't say Notre Dame's not the same team they were the first Saturday of September, but then they are the same team that played the last Saturday of August, right? You are who you are over the course of an entire season. And if you're a Notre Dame fan and you're engaging in people talking about that loss, then you need to own the loss. It's okay. I mean, the game happened. You don't do things to dismiss the loss, because in order to do that, you have to then throw out your best ammo. Because the first narrative that I want to debunk for Notre Dame with Notre Dame fans is this notion that if Notre Dame lost to Texas A&M instead of Northern Illinois, they'd be ranked higher. And that's absolutely false, in my opinion. This isn't an opinion. This isn't a fact, because I can't back it up with facts, because they didn't. But the reality is Notre Dame losing to A&M and then beating Northern Illinois would not get the same benefit of the doubt that Texas is getting for losing to Georgia and beating no one. Notre Dame would not get that benefit of the doubt and be ranked third. You like Texas. They would still be ranked similarly, if not lower. I think they'd be closer to SMU than Penn State in that regard, because they're not. I mean, there is a very clear SEC and Big Ten bias in the rankings, especially the Big Ten. I think that's a real thing. We'll dive into that. But this notion that Notre Dame would have been better off losing to A&M instead of Northern Illinois is just not accurate. And the other part of it too, guys, is it's easier to convince people that Notre Dame had a bad day against Northern Illinois. That doesn't define who they are, than to try to somehow claim credibility over a schedule where your best win is over a 6-3 Louisville team and your next best win is over Navy. You want to bump those down to where those are wins 2 and 3, and your best win is still over the number 1 team in the SEC right now. So that narrative is one that Notre Dame fans are using that we need to kind of get out and just say, hey, let's dismiss that one right now. That's one on our side that we need to not use, because that I don't believe that to be accurate. But there's another one floating around, of especially from SEC fans, who are trying to dismiss the Texas A&M game, and their new talking point is, and I'm going to read this because this is actually being done by someone who runs a website, who's got close to as many Twitter followers as I have. He's a publisher and co-founder of a Georgia website, and he started things off this morning with a comment that I want to debunk a little bit, Trev, and you're familiar with where I'm going with this one. And at first it was kind of harmless. I said, okay, He's throwing some spin down there, but you know what? We're going to engage in it. No big deal, whatever. So he starts the conversation off thus way. I'm going to just made that up. I thought it sounded funny. He goes, number 3, Texas, 0, because he's a Georgia fan who's pissed off that Georgia is, down to number 12. Okay. Starts off okay. Number 3, Texas, 0 ranked wins. Also, Georgia beat them at their place convincingly. All right, fair. Good point, buddy. Number 4, Penn State, 0 ranked wins. I'm on your side, Graham. Graham Coffee, this is the guy. I'm on your side. Penn State, we got your back. Penn State, no good wins. Lost to the only good team they've played all year. I'm with you, partner. Let's keep rolling. Let's go. SEC, Notre Dame coming together. Here we go. Number 5, Indiana, 0 ranked wins. 3 for 3, baby. I'm with you. Oh, you're going to bring up number 6, Notre Dame. First of all, Notre Dame's not ranked number 6. But he doesn't talk about ranked wins. He goes, lost to 5-4 Northern Illinois at home. And then he says, number 12, Georgia, 15-point win at number 3, Texas, 28-point neutral site win versus number 20, Clemson. Okay. Someone is going to have to show me how to do the math. Well, Trevor, I was a history major. So I'm going to do my best to engage in math for Mr. Coffee. But I have found when you plug in bad data into a formula, you're going to get a bad result. I don't know if you used calculators when you were in school, Trev. I don't know if you just had them on your computer. But when I was a kid, we had these calculators, the Texas Instrument calculators. And when you try to type in a formula and then you put in wrong data, it would give you an error message. My dude, you just got an error message. When you have to change the narrative and change the data that you're using to make a point, when you get to Notre Dame, you're making a bad argument. You're making a bad argument. When you have to go 0 ranked wins, 0 ranked wins, 0 ranked wins, 0. Oh no, they got 2 ranked wins. Oh shoot, they got a ranked win over the team with the best record in the SEC. How do we change that narrative? You lost to Northern Illinois at home. They did. Very fair. They did. Lost by 2 to Northern Illinois. Bad loss. No doubt about it. You just got your butts kicked by a team that lost at home to a 3-6 Kentucky team. Just want to make sure we remember that one a little bit. You just got your butts kicked by a team that lost to LSU. So let's not pretend like this is all of a sudden some game where your team is just this paradox of virtue, right? I mean, just this wonderful team with no flaws on your resume. You barely beat that same 3-6 Kentucky team by a point. So if you're going to say, well, Notre Dame lost at home to a 5-4 Texas team, and you're going to talk about the wins over Texas, which is a great win, by the way, and you're going to talk about the wins over Clemson, it's a great win, by the way, you can't ignore the rest of the data. When you have to hide data, you're making a bad argument. That's point number 1, Trevor. Point number 2 that Mr. Graham Coffee made when some Notre Dame fans challenged him. And by the way, well done, Notre Dame fans, for respectfully pushing back on Graham's faulty narrative. Here was the next one. Notre Dame fans said to him, okay, in response, he said, thanks for leaving out Notre Dame's 10-point win, 7-point win versus number 19 Louisville, and 37-point win against a ranked Navy team at a neutral site, you absolute hack. That wasn't very nice. But here's what he responded with. Because they'd lose to Texas A&M if they played with Reed. Navy would be the 10th best team on Georgia's schedule. False. And then Louisville win, and the Louisville win isn't as impressive as the Northern Illinois loss is ugly. So Graham went from making some sound points where people would have been like, hey, dude, I'm on your side. We can have this anti-Big Ten conversation. We can be on the same team here, partner. He went from that to let me just utterly embarrass myself with crap arguments, Trevor. And so I just want to share what my response was, because this is what's so annoying about this conversation. First of all, Trevor, I have a question for you. When did Marcel Reed become Lamar Jackson? When did he become Jaden Daniels? Can you help me with this? He went 2 for 2 in the second half against LSU throwing the football. And by the way, Do we need any more confirmation after the Alabama game that LSU has no concept of how to stop a mobile quarterback? Hello, Lenore Sellers. Hello, Marcel Reed. Hello, Jalen Milroe. I mean, can we talk about that, Trevor? So first of all, before I give my response to Graham, can you please tell me how he all of a sudden became C.J. Stroud, Drake May, Caleb Williams, quarterbacks Notre Dame has faced in the last couple years? I'm just curious when he got put on that pedestal.
Yeah, you know what, man? I don't really have a whole lot of answers for you, unfortunately. I think that there's some, especially in the world of quarterbacks, I think that there is a very short road to leaving strong impressions on people when it comes to quarterbacks, in a good or a bad way, right? Think about how quickly people were to write off Riley Leonard after the Northern Illinois game. Rightfully so. Small sample size against Texas A&M, didn't play well against Northern Illinois. It's immediately, hey, who's the backup? Who's going to be taking Notre Dame on? Because it's not going to be Riley Leonard. Narrative changes a little bit. You see the progress that Riley Leonard made throughout the season. And now I would say the majority of Notre Dame fans, whether they like to admit it or not, will agree that Riley Leonard is the quarterback for Notre Dame and will be for the remainder of the season, barring any injury, right? But it's the same thing on the flip side. When there's just a backup quarterback, or when there's a starting quarterback who's just playing okay, and the starter comes in or the backup comes in and plays just a little better or adds a different dynamic to the game like Marcel Reed can't, Connor Wegman can't run.
And played great in the second half of that game. Like, we
Yeah.
can admit that. He played great against a team that has no clue how to stop a mobile quarterback.
Absolutely. But the narrative goes from here to here. And that's
No, it doesn't, Trevor. It goes from there to off the freaking screen.
Fair.
Like, you're being nice, and I love you for that. But it goes off the screen, Trev. Continue your point, but like, it's beyond that. It's beyond that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just, especially I've seen it a lot with quarterbacks who are mobile, like quarterbacks who add that extra bit of, they add a different component to the offense that maybe a Connor Wegman can't, right?
Yeah.
And that's Marcel Reed. But that went from, since they did this to LSU, a team who I will say Notre Dame would also beat. I have, again, no stats to back that up. But Texas A&M.
I do. Notre Dame in the same stadium beat Texas A&M by 10.
Fair
in
enough.
that same stadium, Texas A&M beat LSU by 15, right? So there's some math for you.
Yeah,
there's some math for you, partner. Why don't you go ahead and put that into your Texas instrument there, buddy?
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and do that. And Trevor, the other thing too is I love how they're acting like that's the only game Marcel Reed has played. So this is my response to that nonsense, because we've seen this a lot. Graham Coffey just kind of finally, he was the guy that put me over the edge with this conversation. But this isn't new. He's not the only one saying this. Has been said since the LSU game. All right, I like facts. You like facts. I like data. You like data. Right? Okay. So let's not forget that Marcel Reed has actually started 4 games this season. In those 4 games, they beat a 4-5 Florida team 33-20. They beat a 6-4 Bowling Green team 26-20. They beat a 5-4 Arkansas team who just got beat by like 193 by Ole Miss last week. Tad hyperbolic, but not as much as you'd think. 21-17. And then they played Arkansas week after beating LSU and lost 44-20 with Marcel Reed at starting quarterback, Trevor. And all of a sudden, that now that you knew to prepare for him and you knew he was a starter and you actually have some film on him now, all of a sudden, Marcel Reed doesn't look so hot, right? I mean, it goes 18 of 28, 206 yards, 7.4 yards per attempt, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. Goes 46 yards on 16 carries. Doesn't look anything like the guy against LSU who has no clue how to defend a mobile quarterback. I'm going to keep saying that because it's incredibly true. They have no idea how to defend a mobile quarterback. But let's point to something, Trev. So let's use some data. Let's use some data. All right. This is what I'm going to show to y'all here real quick. Okay? This is what Notre Dame has done since the Texas A&M game. This includes the loss to Northern Illinois. Since these two teams have played, Notre Dame has scored 40.3 points per game. They've allowed 10.9 points per game. Notre Dame has gone for 419.1 yards per game, given up 278.1 yards per game. In Marcel Reed's 4 starts, Texas A&M has scored 25 points per game and allowed 25.3 points per game. In his 4 starts, that include a MAC team, a sub-500 SEC team, and a 1 game over 500 SEC team, right? 25.3 points allowed, 387.3 yards allowed. So they've been outscored and outgained in 4 games with Marcel Reed as your starting quarterback. And you want to talk to me about Notre Dame would not beat Texas A&M today if they played? Are you freaking kidding me? Are you kidding me? Tell me you actually don't watch college football other than your favorite team without telling me you actually watch college football without your favorite team. Because here's the thing that we do. We actually watch teams play. We don't sit here and tell Notre Dame fans, you guys, we could beat this team. Oh, how many times have you watched them play? Well, I haven't watched them play, but I looked at their stats. No, we watch these teams play. That versus that, Trevor, I'm going out on a limb here. But that, over the last 2 months, looks a whole lot better than that. If you added their points against LSU and yards against LSU in the second half, doubled them for the course of an entire game, then hey, maybe it might be close. Nope, it isn't. It's not anywhere close, guys. It's not anywhere close. So, SEC fans, I got some advice for you. Stick to truth. You have an argument on your side. We'll get to that in the next segment. We will. You have some data. Keep Notre Dame's name out of your mouth because they smacked your best team right now on the road. Your number one, your team that right now, if the season ended today, would be the number 1 seed in the conference championship game. They beat them by 10 and did not play very well. Go watch the game. They did not play very well. So don't come at me, well, Navy's this and Navy's that. Navy is not the 10th best team on your schedule. Tell me you've never watched Navy play without telling me you've never watched Navy play. You're clowning yourself. You're embarrassing yourself. Don't do that because you actually, here's the thing, Trev, they actually have a good argument to make about the Big Ten bias in the rankings. But that's why I said at the beginning, I was jokingly, hey, I'm with you on the Texas stuff. I'm with you on the Penn State stuff. I'm with you with the Indiana stuff. Well, hold on a second. Hold on a second. You went from spitting facts to spitting nonsense like that, brother. And now you've lost your way. So let me help you get back on your way. Leave Notre Dame out your mouth right now, okay? Especially if you're a Georgia fan. Because your whole 2 combined wins over Notre Dame the last decade were like by combined 7 points. Bama fans can say whatever they want about Notre Dame. Whatever they want about Notre Dame. Because we've seen Notre Dame and Bama play twice in the last 15 years, and Bama destroyed Notre Dame both times. They toyed with Notre Dame in 2020. LSU fans can't say jack to Notre Dame because he beat you twice in the last decade. You hired the coach from Notre Dame who beat you twice, and you gotten worse every year since he's been there. Facts, not opinion, not feelings, but facts. Okay? A&M can't say jack to Notre Dame. Maybe next year they will be able to say jack if they come to Notre Dame Stadium and beat them. That's going to be a heck of a game. But if your name's not Bama, shut up. Because you can't act like Notre Dame's not a good football team because you've seen firsthand that they are. Georgia saw firsthand that Notre Dame is a good football team. Georgia's better. They've been better the last decade. Not arguing that. They got 2 titles. They beat Notre Dame 2-0. But don't act like your 1-point win and your 6-point win when Notre Dame had the ball in your territory with less than a minute to go with a chance to win somehow makes Notre Dame this bad football team. And that wasn't even a great Notre Dame team. Go look what Michigan did to them about a month later. So don't embarrass yourself and lose your way. South Carolina fans can't say jack to Notre Dame. We spotted you 2 pick sixes, and you still couldn't win. So I'll have your back if you want to have a conversation about the Big Ten, and we will have one. Trevor and I will have one. But when you try to dismiss this game against Texas A&M and say they're a different team, if you want to actually be someone that generates respect and people don't look at as some clown that spins like every other media person tends to do nowadays, then actually use real data. Because if you're going to say the A&M game doesn't count, cool. Then the Northern Illinois game doesn't count either because they were one game apart. So if you want to talk about recent games, Trevor, Notre Dame fans will gladly talk about most recent games. Sagarin has this thing where they look at like the most recent games played and they rank teams off of dominance over. Notre Dame's ranked number 1 because they are absolutely destroying people. Since the Northern Illinois loss, Notre Dame is averaging 44 points a game. They're giving up 10.1 points per game. Let's talk about the rest of the season, and we'll leave those first 2 games behind. If you want to go there, I'll drop the A&M game if you drop the Northern Illinois game. Now let's talk resumes. Because here's the number of teams that have been more dominant relative to margin of victory since the Northern Illinois game. Here's the list of teams, Trevor. And that's the list. Nobody. So you're trying to tell me Marcel Reed against Florida, Bowling Green, Arkansas, and South Carolina has those numbers. A&M has those numbers, but you want to talk to me about Notre Dame wouldn't beat them? My man, you're losing your way. Don't do that. It's like that scene from Good Will Hunting. You're going to come to 2 truths in life. First one, don't do that. And that's my advice to SEC fans. You have an argument to make. Truth is on your side in certain ways. Don't do this. Embarrass yourself, and now you've lost all credibility. Because now the rest of the stuff you said becomes like, well, now I don't believe you because you just told me you don't know how to make a good argument. You were almost there. You were so close to making a coherent, truthful, non-biased argument, and then you just kind of had to go ruin it with that nonsense. But Trev, if the SEC fans want to say the A&M doesn't matter, okay, cool. Let's throw out the first 2 weeks. Now let's have a debate about resumes, because I'll gladly stack Notre Dame's resume up against anybody since week 2. Gladly. So, SEC fans, we will have something for you here in a little bit. You will like what we have to say here in a little bit, but you're gonna need to go ahead and leave Notre Dame's name out of your mouth, because we have evidence that Notre Dame can go play one of your best teams in the first game of a new coordinator's regime with 9 freshman, sophomore eligibility players and 2 transfers that didn't play any snap in the spring, and they beat you by 10, missing their left tackle in that game and beat you by 10. All-American tight end, barely played, beat you by 10. Stud D tackles, just kind of okay, beat you by 10. Started 5 sophomores on defense, beat you by 10. It's just not a good place to go, Trev, and I think that I kind of went out there and did a nice job of dismantling that. Do you have anything you want to add to this A&M SEC nonsense when it relates to Notre Dame?
No, I agree. I think you did a really good job of providing a factual breakdown of why the argument makes no sense. This is the reason why I hate conference bias, because you have a Georgia sympathizer bringing up 2 teams that have nothing to do with Georgia, which I think is weird. Again, like I don't understand this backing of, well, this is my team, but I would rather see the conference overall win than my team. And I think that's the argument that you go to, because you know that Georgia can't stack up against Notre Dame. If you're going to sit there and compare resumes, one team has 1 loss, the other one has 2 losses. Georgia's best wins are against the Texas team who had their arguably worst day on the field in 2024, and against the Clemson team who, again, same thing. So I don't really know where Texas A&M comes into that argument if you're trying to argue that Georgia should be ranked ahead of Notre Dame. That's where the math isn't mathing for me. Georgia should be ranked ahead of Notre Dame because Marcel Reed would have beat Notre Dame. That misses me. That's incorrect for a multitude of different reasons. But your argument that Georgia being ranked too low is because if in a hypothetical world, Mike Elko decided to go with Marcel Reed over Notre Dame, they in fact wouldn't have lost by 10. I don't know. I don't really know where the lines connect there. So again, at the end of the day, Mr. Coffee, whatever helps you sleep at night, I guess, tell yourself whatever you need to. But the fact of the matter is, when you go and you look at those stats, and in the points per game average that Notre Dame has averaged since the Northern Illinois loss, that puts them at 6th in the country. With Marcel Reed averaging 25 points a game as a starter, that puts them at 93rd in the country. So, again, you can spin it whatever way you want to. I mean, yeah, I guess at that point, well, if Johnny Manziel had any eligibility left, he also could have beaten Notre Dame, I suppose. If we're just
one quick change, Trev, if you took out the Northern Illinois game, Notre Dame's actually 2nd scoring. Because in my data, I included Northern Illinois. I included the loss in my data. That was since the A&M game. If you took the Northern Illinois game out because they want to ignore the first couple weeks because it doesn't fit their narrative, then cool. The Notre Dame's averaging 44 points a game, which puts them 1 point behind Miami, who's at 45. So, and their scoring defense would rank number 1. So, since the Northern Illinois game, Notre Dame would rank 2nd in scoring and second in scoring offense and 1st in scoring defense. But please, talk to me about how A&M is somehow some really good football team. Let's not forget something else. The only reason Notre Dame's stats are as low as they are is because they played against MAC teams and they did not score 30 in either game. Notre Dame has been far better against Power 4 teams this year than they have those type of teams. If you look at Notre Dame's scoring offense, Trevor, to back up your point, and you just go against FBS teams, just Power 4 teams, Notre Dame is 2nd in the country in scoring, and they're behind James Madison, who's played 1 game, and they've scored 70 points against North Carolina. Notre Dame's a 42. Number 3 right behind him is Toledo, who scored 41 points against an SEC team, by the way. I believe they scored the same amount. Actually, they might have scored more, but I believe they scored the same amount of points against Mississippi State as what I'm going to look it up, as what Georgia did, because they played Mississippi State, beat Mississippi State 41-17 at Mississippi State. Georgia beat Mississippi State at home 41-31. So you might want to leave the MAC conversation out of it just a little bit here, right? Because I could spin some numbers and say some stupid things too, just like you did. But yes, Notre Dame, since that game, Trevor, actually would be even better than they are. So, yeah. How's that for you? Next closest is Miami at 40.3. Notre Dame and Miami are the only 2 teams averaging over 40 points a game against Power 4 teams. That's it. Texas A&M's 21st at 31.2. And you want to do scoring defense just for fun against Power 4 teams, Trevor? Notre Dame, do you know where Notre Dame ranks against Power 4 teams in scoring defense? So if you took every team that's played more than 1 game against a Power 4 team, how have teams fared against Power 4 teams? Notre Dame ranks number 1 in scoring offense and number 1 in scoring defense, Trevor. So please, 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 please spare us with the, well, if Marcel Reed played. Like, we've seen Notre Dame against Caleb Williams. We've seen him against Drake May. We've seen him against C.J. Stroud. We've seen good quarterbacks. I know the SEC thinks the only good football in the country is being played in the SEC. I understand all that. I get that. But we've seen some pretty good quarterbacks, Trev. So your point is even more valid because it's even more impressive than even you said.
Yeah, I don't think Marcel Reed is going to be the guy that kind of resets the narrative of how Notre Dame performs against Power 4 quarterbacks. But like I said, at the end of the day, whatever helps you sleep at night. At the end of the day, I look at it this way. Georgia didn't handle business. They have 2 losses. One of them a really, really bad loss to Ole Miss. I'm not saying the bad is in like the level of opponent, but you lost by 18 points. If you're going to try to crown yourself as one of the best teams in the country, you don't lose by 18 points. I don't care who you're playing. Like, that's just my opinion. Yeah, like whatever, man. At the end of the day, facts are the facts. Notre Dame's 8th, Georgia's 12th, and they're on the outside looking in. It is what it is.
Yeah.
Handle business this week against Tennessee. Because then if you have 3 losses, yeah, your schedule is hard and that's tough. That's also the luck of the draw that you got. Yes, the SEC did you some favors with, we're going to schedule you basically against the hardest teams, which is the complete polar opposite of what the Big Ten did. And I know we're going to dive into it a little later because unfortunately the committee is kind of favoring what the Big Ten did, not what the SEC did. But if you're Georgia, you still have to go in and handle business. You still have to beat the teams that you're supposed to play. Like that's, if you're going to use the argument against, well, the Big Ten teams aren't in control of who they schedule. They just have to go out and beat who's on their schedule. True. Then so do SEC opponents. And if you don't do it, you don't do it. Like the fact of the matter is, whether Carson Beck is playing top tier talent or not, he's playing like garbage this year. There's no argument around it otherwise.
Against good teams and bad teams.
That's what I'm saying. Like in his last 3 games, he's had 2 touchdown passes and 7 interceptions. But that's not well, their schedule's tough. And it's like, okay. And he was supposed to be the best quarterback in college football this year. What's the excuse there? Is it Marcel Reed? Is it because Marcel Reed didn't play against Notre Dame? That's why Carson Beck is playing poorly. I just, if you're going to come with a debate, come correct. That's my whole thing. Like if you're going to try to say things to back your specific team, Notre Dame catching a stray was a little weird to me because I saw that whole thread.
It just was unnecessary, Trevor. There's no point to you had good data to use. You could have brought Miami in that conversation. Why is Miami ranked ahead of Georgia? Miami's only played a couple good teams all year. They've got a bunch of close losses. You could look at Miami and say, look, Miami's 9-1, but they're real close to being like 6-4. They were getting blown out in the second half by Duke and Cal, and they came back and won. You could have used that argument. There's no need to bring Notre Dame, who has literally dominated every team they've played since Northern Illinois. Marcus Freeman's 18-4 the last 2 years. 16 of those 18 wins have been by 10 points or more. The only 2 games that weren't were against a ranked Duke team on the road, a game they led 10-0 at halftime, and a home game over against Louisville, a game they led 21-7 at halftime. And Louisville scored last to make it closer. Like there was just no need for that. There was no need for that. Because here's the thing, you have an argument. You have an argument to make about Big Ten bias after the top 2 teams. You have an argument to make. But you screwed yourself when you basically started spinning. Because anytime you got to spin, you've lost the argument. I've always felt this way. If you have to misuse data or spin data to win an argument, you've lost the argument. Because the truth is the truth. You can't really talk against that. It is what it is. I mean, hey, Notre Dame's a better program than Georgia the last 10 years. Well, what's your evidence, Brian? I can give you all this. Yeah, but how many titles did they won? None. How many's Georgia won? 2. Have they played head-to-head? Sure. But Notre Dame this, Notre Dame that, Notre Dame that. But, okay, well, who won those 2 games? Georgia did, 2-0, right? Like, the truth is the truth. You can't ignore it. And we're not trying to pretend like the Northern Illinois game didn't happen, but don't pretend like everything else hasn't happened either, because then you lose me. You lose me at that point in time. So that's an anti-Notre Dame narrative that, like, guys, it's okay. It's okay to admit that Notre Dame's really good. It is. I've even had a couple Ohio State fans respond to me on Twitter like, yeah, Notre Dame's playing really well. And they got to get some little backhanded childish jab against Northern Illinois. It's fine, fair, whatever. It happened. You know, I've seen some fans are, well, hey, this is a really good Notre Dame team. But for whatever reason, SEC fans can literally not admit that anyone is good outside the SEC. They just can't do it. They can't do it. Clemson wins 2 titles, beats Alabama twice. Yeah, but they're really not that good after all. Like, it's okay. This is why people hate you. It's okay to admit that other people. Yeah, okay. Let's say you have the best conference in college football. Okay, sure. But it's okay to say that there's other good teams. It's okay to say Ohio State's really good. It's okay to say Oregon's really good. It's okay to say Notre Dame's really good. It's okay, guys. It's not going to kill you. It's not going to kill you. I mean, the 2 best teams in your league are old school Big 8 Southwest Conference teams. It's okay to admit there's other good leagues out there. It is.
Well, yeah, because I think the frustrating thing for me around SEC fans is whenever a team wins the national title that's not in the SEC, the way that they spin the narrative is like the SEC allowed it to happen.
Right.
You know, it's like, well, you didn't get our best. You know, this is a down year for the SEC. It's like, oh, so every year that you don't win, it's just a down year. Is that the correlation that you're saying? Like, you just can't accept that another team is better, another conference has a better team? Yeah, I think that's really frustrating. But look, with the two things can be true. The loss in Northern Illinois was bad. True.
Yeah.
Notre Dame is also one of the best football teams in the country right now. Also true. So
Yeah.
I just, on both sides, whether you're a Notre Dame fan or not, or whether you're a Notre Dame hater or not, both things can be true.
Right.
You want to come to two people and talk about how bad the Northern Illinois loss was? Come talk to me and Brian.
Yeah.
We
watch
talked
our
for
shows about it.
5.5 hours about it after the post game, and none of it was around, oh, it's just a bad day.
Yeah, it was a bad day. It was an inexcusable day. It's not. It's an unforgettable day in our fandom, but it's not an unforgettable day when you're arguing Notre Dame's resume, because it has to count. It has to count.
Sure.
You don't get to say,
Absolutely.
well, Notre Dame's not the same team now, so they should be the number 2 seed. Like if I were to say right now, I think if Notre Dame played Ohio State right now, I think Notre Dame would win. I actually believe that. So, but calm down, Ohio State fans, because that's not my point. But that doesn't mean that I should then rank Notre Dame ahead of Ohio State. Doesn't mean that, because Ohio State still has a better resume. So we could debate, like there's a couple Ohio State fans in the chat, and we could have a debate about, is Notre Dame better than Ohio State? We could have that. That'd be a fun discussion. But we would flat out sit down and agree, well, do you think Notre Dame should be ranked ahead of Ohio State? No, they should not be ranked ahead of Ohio State, because Ohio State played a MAC team that's got a winning record, by the way, and blew them out. Now, Northern Illinois blew out that same MAC team, but that doesn't mean anything, because Notre Dame played a MAC team and got beat at home in a game, Trev, they never led after the first drive. Never led. So Ohio State's got a better resume. I can admit that. I can flat out admit that and still say, but Notre Dame's still a really good football team. It's okay to do both of those things. It's okay for you to say, hey, I think this team would beat that team, but I'm not going to go disparage this team and say, yeah, but Ohio State barely beat Nebraska. It had a bad day. It happens. Everybody has one. You know, and that's the thing that drives me nuts, is this inability to have an honest conversation with SEC fans is really mind-boggling to me. It really is. It really is. And there's some Notre Dame fans that'll do that. I haven't seen them in a while, but there's a poster that just loves to do things to talk Notre Dame down. And that's fine. That's fine. And Notre Dame gave you reason to do that in the first Saturday of September. That game existed. That's my only point, man. Is just be honest. Be honest. Be honest. Georgia will get their chance to jump back in the top 12 this week when they play Tennessee. If they beat Tennessee, they'll jump back in, and Tennessee will fall down. And if they don't beat Tennessee, then guess what? They're just not that good. It's okay to say this is not a typical Georgia team. It's okay to say that. They just got crushed. Because remember, the narrative for a long time was, well, they haven't lost to anybody other than Alabama. Oh, they can't use that anymore because Ole Miss beat you. You know what I mean? Like, they just kicked your butt. They just kicked your butt. It wasn't like a fluky game, Trev. Kind of like Kentucky beating Ole Miss was a little bit of a fluky game. They kicked your butt from start to finish. And again, I don't care if you hate Notre Dame. That's fine. Hating someone doesn't mean that, like, if your hatred causes you to be a liar or be dishonest, that's a you problem. That's not a Notre Dame problem. That's why I said there, I hate Ohio State. I do hate Ohio State. Everybody knows that. I grew up in Ohio, around Ohio State fans. That's the reason why. But I'm not going to sit here and say, but they're not that good. They're not as good. They're not as good as this team or that team or the other team. Okay, now you're making yourself look bad. And my hatred for Ohio State's not going to make me be dishonest and sit here and tell you that I think Notre Dame should rank ahead of Ohio State. Well, what's your evidence for that, Brian? Well, over the last month, Notre Dame's averaging this amount, and Ohio State's imagining, yeah, okay, but what happened against Northern Illinois? But it doesn't matter. It was a long time ago. Oh, so that part of the season doesn't count? No. All right, so are you going to not count the Texas A&M game? No, I'm going to count that one. I'm going to count that one, but I'm not going to count the game that happened the next week. Right? That's what you're doing. I'm giving you the same BS Notre Dame response that you are doing right now. I'm pretending that this, and this doesn't happen so I can then espouse my hatred of a team while then trying to diminish what they've accomplished, which says more about me and my ability to put together a rational argument than it does about that team. You get what I'm saying, Trevor? Well, I mean, Oregon barely beat Boise State. They struggled to beat Idaho. Yeah, okay, they got lucky against Ohio State. They're not that good. Well, that's stupid. It's the dumbest thing, like that's what they're doing right now. And you know what though, at the end of the day, Trev, you know why I kind of like this? Because if Notre Dame wasn't legit, they wouldn't talk about Notre Dame.
So I'm glad you brought that up, because I think there's two different ways that you can kind of look at where Notre Dame is at right now. I think people don't like where Notre Dame is at right now because people don't want to play Notre Dame. That's my take on it. Legitimately, there's been teams in the past where it's like, well, I don't think they should be ranked that high.
They don't want to have to come up to South Bend in December and
sure,
play this team and play this team.
Or just play them anywhere. Notre Dame is one of the hottest teams in the country right now. Like they are. Like that, you see it statistically, eye test, on paper, whatever. Notre Dame's one of the hottest football teams in the country right now. And you look at that and you're going down the stretch, no team's going to say, I don't want to play them at all. Think about our mindset when Notre Dame got the draw of Penn State in the first round. We were like, yeah.
Please let that happen. But you know what? When I see them get Ole Miss, I'm like, I don't like that matchup as much, because I'm honest and I can say that's a matchup. How they've got talented receivers, they've got a real good D line. That's a matchup that, let's see how this goes a little bit. You can be honest about that, but you're correct. They do not. Yeah, Trevor, they do not want to come up and play Notre Dame in the first round.
No,
they don't.
No, not at all. I mean, it's just. You look at the matchups. Like, there was a reason why in 2022 people were outraged that Ohio State still made the playoffs without winning the Big Ten or playing in the Big Ten championship. One of that was, there's only 4 teams. There are some people that thought some more should be deserving. But then what did Ohio State do? Took Georgia down to the wire and had a chance to win the game at the end of the game. And then probably the worst field goal attempt I've ever seen in my life took place. But it reminds me of that a little bit. It's like, why are they in? Why should they be in? They shouldn't be in because Georgia's done this. And you remember Northern Illinois. You're going to put a team that loses to Northern Illinois in that. Look, if you're bringing up an argument of a team for a game that they played on September 7th, that tells me one thing, and it's you don't want to play them. That's what that tells me. And I don't blame you. I would not want to play Notre Dame. While
dismissing the game that was played the week before and acting like that didn't happen, and they're not the same teams and blah. Like, that's the thing, is use similar logic. Use the same logic. Use the same logic that you're going to use, because then if you're going to say, well, those games don't count, then okay, then I don't care about your 31-point win over Clemson. So let's just go talk about the last 5-6 games. Okay. Well, what's Georgia done here in the last 5-6 games, Trev? What's their recent record? Okay, well, they're 4-2 in the last 6 games. If you want to talk about what's happened since the Notre Dame played Northern Illinois, and you want to say, okay, well, they're 5-2. They lost to Alabama, barely beat Kentucky, had an ugly one over Mississippi State in which their coach shoved a player, because he's an idiot, and got their butts kicked by Ole Miss. And if not for DJ Lagway going down in the Florida game, who knows how that game turns out? A Florida team that, by the way, Miami destroyed, FYI, who Texas just destroyed, FYI, a week after you played them. Just one point, make sure we point that out. And that's why I'm still pissed at Bama. I'm still really pissed at Alabama, because Alabama could have shut all this crap down if they didn't take their foot off the gas in the second quarter against Georgia. If they didn't take their foot off the gas after they went up 28-0 and let Georgia get back in that game, we're not even having this conversation, because they would have beat them by 30, and we wouldn't be sitting here talking about Georgia as a playoff team. Nobody would be talking about Georgia. Georgia fans wouldn't even be talking about Georgia as a playoff team if Alabama wouldn't have taken their foot off the gas, because that's what that was, Trevor. That was them taking their foot off the gas and letting that team get back in it, because Kalen DeBoer, was a lesson learned for him. So anyway, so I think we've kind of addressed those, Trev. I think we've addressed the Notre Dame narratives, I think, relatively well. You ready to dive into the national ones?
Let's do it.
Or do you want to have something else you want to add about the Notre Dame stuff?
No, let's do it, man. I think we've covered everything that we need to. I'm laying on the bed of nobody wants to play Notre Dame, and I don't.
No. Yeah, and you know who I don't hear talking about Notre Dame right now? Bama fans, Ohio State fans, Oregon fans, because they don't have that same feeling because they've handled their business recently. You know what I mean? Like they're focused on their team. They don't have to spin it. So anyway, before we get there, Trev, folks, do us a favor, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. When you guys hit the like button, when you respond in comments, if you listen later, so like if you don't listen live and you put comments in there, if you share the podcast, all those things help our algorithm and help us spread Irish Breakdown, help us grow, help us be more successful in all the ways that includes, and it allows us to start doing more. I've got a lot of ideas of things that I'm thinking about doing for our show moving forward. We'll see what do those things do. But when you guys do your part, listening, liking, sharing, and doing all that, it helps us grow even more. So make sure you guys do that, and we greatly, greatly appreciate that. So, Trevor, I want to talk about the national reaction to the rankings last night. And to begin, my biggest issue is we as a society, and this is going to be a bit of I'm going to be very quick about this, but the issue we're having, and this is the issue with Graham's tweet and a lot of these other tweets, is people are trying to make all-encompassing arguments in one, 240 character tweet. And so what we've done is we reverted to pot shots and talking points instead of trying to have a real discussion. And I think the problem is it doesn't stay on Twitter. I think those lazy quick hitter Twitter things where you focus on like one little data point, because that's all the room you have, is bleeding into the discussions we have on other platforms. I hear those type of lazy, short, narrow focus quick hitters in national podcasts. I hear it in national writers where they'll focus on the Northern Illinois loss, or they'll focus on the Ohio State loss in order to hype up Penn State. And we get into this really lazy, short-sighted 240 character mindset where we focus on small things because we don't have enough bandwidth to have a bigger picture conversation. And I wouldn't mind that as much if I didn't see that bleeding into the committee rankings. That's my biggest concern, is the things I'm hearing the committee say are these really short and like small data points where we're going to ignore all this and focus on Penn State's ranked 4th because they have the best loss of anybody or something stupid like that. Well, other than Ohio State, who's behind the number 2 team. Yeah, but who have they won? Doesn't matter, because look at their loss. Well, that doesn't make any sense. And that's the thing that's kind of hurting this whole thing, Trevor, is nobody's willing to engage, or fewer people are willing to engage in a more holistic argument where we actually talk about the entire resume of teams. And that was what our rant was about this last segment, is if all you're going to talk about with Notre Dame is Marcel Reed or Northern Illinois, then what you're telling me is you're a shallow thinker. And you don't have the knowledge or the debating ability to have a grown-up conversation where you look at it. And then other people that I respect are sort of following the trends instead of saying, hold on a second, this is not okay. And there's a sports writer that I respect incredibly who still can't get past the Northern Illinois loss, who won't dog Penn State because he just will only talk about their loss to Ohio State. That's all he'll focus on. And so I think Twitter has done some good things, but this is where I say Twitter has had a very, very negative impact, because the lack of ability to expand on points on Twitter is now bleeding into our shows, our podcasts, and our writing. And that's concerning. And we see that in how people are debating this SEC versus Big Ten versus whoever type of thing that we're going to get into here next. So I thought that was at least worth mentioning.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. There's not enough room to put together a cohesive argument in that small amount, because you're only taking snippets. What do we always talk about? You use statistics and then you have to use context, and you have to look deeper. And that's the issue. On Twitter, you just can't.
So, Trev, let's get into this conversation. The first sort of narrative that I'm seeing that is really interesting is this SEC versus Big Ten conversation. And right now, it's just more of a fan conversation, and you're seeing some national analysts talk about it. But I'm really curious how this is going to go in future years, because right now, you can't. If you're an intellectually honest Big Ten fan, you can't look at the rankings from last night and say that there isn't a very clear Big Ten bias in the rankings. 4 of the top 5 teams are ranked from the Big Ten. 2 of those 5 teams have won 0 games over teams that are ranked, and they've only won 1 game against teams that were ranked at the time. Notre Dame has 3 by themselves.
Yeah.
You know, and when you look at the resumes of these teams, it's some okay. Well, Indiana hasn't beaten anybody. Okay, BYU or Indiana hasn't lost to anybody. All right, fair. BYU hasn't lost to anybody either, and they have 2 wins over teams currently ranked in the top 20. Why isn't Well, Indiana's blown. Okay, so now we're going to margin of victory over teams that aren't any good compared to a team that just keeps winning against good teams week after week after week. You know what I mean? So this is where I said I'm frustrated that SEC fans are making these really crappy, almost cursed, making these really crappy arguments, because I'm like, dude, we'd have your back right now if you'd stop being morons when you talk about Notre Dame. It's like I'm trying to remember the movie, but it's like, why do you make me hurt you? Why do you make me do this to you? I wanted to be on your side. I wanted to have your back. Let's all go against the Big Ten. And then you're like, oh, hold on a second. Like, why do you make me do this to you? Why? Why do you make me do this? Because we were going to have your back. We were. And if you were smart, you'd be like this is where SEC fans are missing the mark, Trevor. If you were smart, you'd say, hey, hold on a second. Why isn't Notre Dame ahead of those teams? Because then they get those teams closer to you. Well, hold on a second. Notre Dame beat one of our best teams on the road by 10. Yeah, I know we lost, but look what they did to Purdue. The only Big Ten team they've played. Purdue played number 1 Ohio State, or number 1 Oregon, number 2 Ohio State, and number 8 Notre Dame. Notre Dame beat them by 59. Ohio State and Oregon beat them by combined 80. Notre Dame outgained them by more yards than Ohio State and Oregon combined. Notre Dame rushed for more yards against them than Ohio State and Oregon combined, and Ohio State got them at home. Now, that would be spin, but it'd be a lot more truthful spin than what you're doing right now. You get what I'm saying? Like, I'm not saying, and not to say that Notre Dame should be ahead of Oregon or Ohio State. They shouldn't be. I've already said that. But to say you need to get Penn State and Indiana closer to you, then this is a different argument. BYU should be ahead of those teams. That's the argument you should be making. Notre Dame and BYU should be ahead of those teams. Because the closer you get Penn State and Indiana to you, down at 10, 11, 12, if Tennessee falls, if they lose to Georgia, the better it's going to be for you as an SEC, as a conference, to say now we can get there. So this is why you're silly for not jumping on the Notre Dame bandwagon and using Notre Dame to make your point for you. Right? That's my thing. So the Big Ten, I mean, you can't make it. No one, you said it last night, Trevor. No one has yet to make a good argument for why Penn State's in the top 4. I've heard some good arguments for Indiana. Some are, compelling, and I don't disagree with them. Others not so compelling, because there is some legitimacy to the reality that, yeah, Indiana hasn't beaten anybody, but hasn't Indiana done what an elite team was supposed to do to playing a bunch of nobodies? They're scoring 43.9 points per game. They're giving up 13.8 points per game. I talked about scoring offense and scoring defense against Power 5, against FBS teams, Trev. Well, or Power 5 teams, well, if you look at Indiana ranks 6th in all of college football, 3rd amongst teams that have played more than one game in scoring offense. They're at 39.9. If you look at Indiana's defense, Trev, they rank 6th overall in scoring defense. If you look at where they are against Power 5 teams, they rank 9th overall at 16.3. And they would move up 2 spots if you remove teams that have only played one game against a Power 5 opponent. Okay, they haven't played anybody, but they're dominating, right? I mean, so you may not buy that argument, Trevor, right? But I think you can at least admit that it's compelling. Penn State, defensively, they're there. They're fifth in all of college football against FBS Power 4 opponents and scoring defense. But Trevor, they're ranked 42nd in offense. They're scoring less than 28 points a game. They've had a lot of ugly wins. Like, what's their really big win? A 21-7 win over Illinois, who just got beat at home by Minnesota, who lost to North Carolina at home. You know what I mean? Who's a middle of the road ACC team? What? I've yet to hear anybody give me that. So when you look at that, that's there's a lot of validity to the Big Ten and SEC are overrated, and the problem is I think a lot of these SEC people are they're missing the sort of the forest through the trees a little bit in the arguments they should be making about this, and that is that the SEC scheduled to make their teams better, the Big Ten scheduled to get as many teams as they could into the playoff. Let me rephrase it. The SEC scheduled for their teams in a way that is going to make their teams prepared to go on championship runs once they get there. The Big Ten simply scheduled the best they could to get teams in. That's the difference.
Yeah, I would say that the Big Ten, the way that I look at it is, I think both conferences kind of took different approaches to what they believed that the committee was going to vote on. The Big Ten erred on the side of just overall record, which is why their out-of-conference schedules weren't hard. That's why their in-conference schedules were not hard. And I think the SEC went the route of, we want to try to give our teams a margin for error a little bit, in that you do now have a 2-loss Alabama team in the top 10, right? Because we're going to give our teams enough chances to get marquee wins, but they don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be 12-0. They don't have to be 11-1. And unfortunately, right now, the committee is erring on the side of, we just like to see how many wins you can get. Right. Because it is like
who has a better loss?
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to.
They're putting a lot of emphasis on losses. They're putting literally the most impressive thing on Penn State's resume right now, you could argue, is a 7-point loss at home to Ohio State. Yeah, you beat Illinois. And like I said last night, one of the most boring college football games I've watched all year. And I mean that legitimately. The IU argument, I can understand. Let me put it this way. I don't
agree with it, but I understand it.
I understand the IU argument more than I understand the Penn State argument. I do. But even then, like I said last night, IU has yet to play a team going into week 11 of college football that has 6 wins. At least Penn State beat a team that was at least 1 point in time ranked in Illinois. I guess IU has never played a team that is ranked when they played them, and it wasn't a situation where they were ranked, IU beats them, and now they're no longer ranked.
Right.
IU has played teams that were never ranked when they played and have yet to be ranked since. I don't understand the argument there. There's 2 different ways to look at the Michigan game. There's one, which you brought up last night, which is, the team kind of showed that they can win ugly. And that is, I will say, that's an argument that I had not yet thought about. Because I'm on the side of, I think IU played their first decent team with a pulse on defense and didn't play well on offense. I think there's also a cause and effect there from a talent perspective. It is. Mason Graham is the best interior defensive lineman IU has faced.
Sure.
Like, it's just, so I have mixed emotions about IU, but at the end of the day, they haven't lost. So I understand that. I don't think that deserves them to be 5th in the country, because then again, the argument is, well, BYU also hasn't lost and they have more ranked wins.
Right.
The argument for IU, in my opinion, is the fact that, well, they're IU. They're not supposed to be this good. Yeah, so we're going to reward them for that.
Right. Here's why I would push back a little bit on Indiana a little bit, because Nebraska's not a very good offense, but Nebraska does have a pretty decent defense. I mean, they held Colorado to 10. They held Ohio State to 21. they've given up 7, 10, 3, 31 to Illinois, 10, 7, 21, and 27 points this year. Indiana scored 56 on them. I mean, they're giving up 19 points per game this year, including the 56-point outcome against Indiana. They're only giving up 308 yards per game this year. They held Ohio State to 285 yards of offense. They held, they've only had one team go over 390. They've only had one team go over 400 yards of offense this year. Nebraska's defense has held 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teams, including Ohio State and Colorado, to under 300 yards of offense. They held another team to 301. Illinois went for 381. That was not a great game. That was their, and then Indiana went for 495. Right, like, so it's kind of like the argument we use for Notre Dame. Yes. They're beating those. They're not beating good teams, but they're beating those not good teams really convincingly. I mean, and you compare, Michigan State, that's a fair one. So Michigan State had 250 yards of offense against Ohio State, or against Oregon. They had 246 yards of offense against Ohio State. They had 193 against Indiana. Ohio State beat Michigan State by 31. Oregon beat it by 21. Indiana beat it by 37. If you look at the offenses, Ohio State had 493 yards against Michigan State. Oregon had 477. Okay, Indy only had 385, but they had 6.3 yards per play because they ran a lot fewer plays. So, like, if you look at that's what I'm saying. I can buy the Indiana argument because you can at least point to those things. And that's kind of what we're pointing to with Notre Dame a little bit also, is they're playing some bad teams, but they're beating those teams worse than anybody else has beat them. All right. So, like, again, do I think they should be in the top 5? No, not really. They shouldn't be ahead of BYU because I still value who you beat more than how you beat them. That's where you and I agree, right? But with Penn State, you can't even use that because they're barely beating bad teams, Trevor. I mean, barely beat Bowling Green. Had an ugly win over UCLA. That looks a little bit better now, I guess. But you're just there's no compelling win. Bill Bender, my guy, I love Bill Bender, but he was like trying to point to the Wisconsin game as evidence that's a good win. I said you just critiqued me for saying that Ohio State had a lot of quality wins, even though they didn't have any great wins. They had a lot of quality wins because I pointed to Iowa, and you don't think Iowa's good, and then you're going to tell me Wisconsin's a good win when a week later Wisconsin lost to Iowa 42-10. You know what I mean? Like, there's nothing that you can say about Penn State other than the Penn State that like, again, Trev, I'm not saying I disagree with you where Indiana should be ranked. I'm not, because in week 10, week 11, you should have played at least one good team. I'm sorry. You just should to be a top 5 team. You should have at least beat one good team. And they haven't. Penn State hasn't either. And they have a loss, and they haven't even looked good when they beat those teams. So that's where and again, like SEC fans, that's where you should be focusing your time, not on Notre Dame. Not on a team that has gone out there and obliterated everybody they've played, basically, has wins over 3 teams that are ranked and they played, and then start they'd be the 10th best team when you just stop. Because you make yourself look bad. When you say stupid stuff like that, you make yourself look like a homer. You're trying to portray yourself as a person who's a media personality or someone who's trying to give honest opinions, and you're not. You're being dishonest. And so, like, going back to this conversation we're having, this is where the committee, it bothers me what the committee is doing because of the hypocrisy of what they're doing. They're going to say, well, we focus on good losses. All right, fine. Then why isn't SMU ranked higher? Because their loss was to a 3-point loss to number 6 BYU. But they actually have 2 top 25 wins. So why isn't SMU higher? Why isn't BYU higher? than Penn State. They have no losses and 2 top 25 wins. You know, like, where would SMU be ranked right now if they'd have beat BYU? Probably top 5, because they'd have a win over BYU. They'd have a win over Louisville on the road. You know what I mean, Trev? Like, that's my thing, is you're rewarding. Here's what it boils down to for me, Trev. They're rewarding the Big Ten for purposely scheduling soft. That's what they're doing. And that's my problem. Because Georgia had to play Texas, Bama, and Ole Miss, right? Bama, let me pull up all these resumes real quick, Trev. Bama had to play Georgia. They have to play at Tennessee. They have to play at LSU, right? That's 3 good teams. LSU had to play at South Carolina, Ole Miss at home, at Texas A&M, home against Alabama. Texas A&M has to play at Florida, at South Carolina, home against LSU, home against Texas. Like, they're all playing each other. They're all playing each other. The only exception is really Texas, but they still had to play Georgia and A&M on the road. You know, they didn't have to play Bama or Ole Miss. Like, they got a little bit of an easy slate. Where if you look at the top 4 teams in the Big Ten, Ohio State's the only one that has to play multiple of that group. Indiana only plays 1. Penn State only plays 1. Oregon only plays 1. And it's all Ohio State. They don't play each other. Oregon didn't have to play Penn State. Yeah, they had to play Michigan. Everybody knew Michigan was going to be as good this year. But even if Michigan was good, that's only 2. They didn't have to play Penn State. You know, Indiana got an easier slate this year. Whereas the SEC said, and Georgia scheduled Clemson out of conference. Texas chose to play Oregon. They didn't have it thrust upon them like Michigan. They didn't have it thrust upon them like Oregon did. They chose to play that. Oregon chose to play their best non-conference game against Boise State. Now, Boise State's a good football team. But I'm sorry, that should not be your toughest non-conference game. It should not be. Alabama chose to play Wisconsin non-conference. You know what I mean? Like, that's a different animal. On the road. You saw a lot of these, not all. Texas A&M chose to play Notre Dame. You're seeing a lot of these SEC teams go out there and say, hey, LSU chose to play USC on a neutral field. You know, Tennessee chose to play NC State on a neutral field, who traditionally has been a better football team than they are this season. Right? So you look at it, Trevor, and you're like, the Big Ten teams, and look, I think Ohio State's got a great resume because of who they got in conference, but Ohio State's non-conference resume is embarrassing. They played Akron, Western Michigan, and Marshall. That's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. You know, and to a degree, I kind of understand it because you do have to play at Oregon. You do have to play at Penn State. You have to play Michigan. You had to play at Michigan State. You get Iowa at home. All right, but Georgia did that, and they've got to go freaking play Clemson on a neutral field. You know, Penn State went out and played the old mighty Mountaineers of West Virginia, Bowling Green, and Kent State in their non-conference. You know what I mean? Like, that's my frustration, Trevor, is a lot of these teams played really soft, purposely played really soft non-conference schedules. Michigan did the same thing last year. In Indiana, Florida International, Western Illinois, and Charlotte. Like, the committee's rewarding teams that purposely scheduled soft, and they're punishing teams that purposely scheduled harder. And that's my point. That's my beef with those two things. And so really the committee's to blame, in my opinion, because, hey, you know what the Big Ten is doing, punish them. But you're not going to do that when the freaking the leader of that group is the current athletic director at Michigan, knowing that those conferences get rewarded by the more teams they have in the top 25 or in the playoff. It's a conflict of interest. And that's why they shouldn't have people that are currently affiliated with schools on the committee. That's my issue.
Yeah, I'm
that's
with
where
you.
the SEC people have a beef.
Well, I mean, and here's my issue with the Big Ten. And this is why I don't respect the Big Ten. And people that know me closely know that I have never respected the Big Ten. This is them every year. Every year, this is the Big Ten. Their out-of-conference schedule is Charmin Ultrasoft, And they know that AP rankings, coaching poll rankings will reward them for just winning. That's year in and year out. So then that's why you get all of these Fox big noon kickoffs of number 5 Penn State versus number 2 Ohio State. And then you go back and look, and Penn State's played the equivalent of nobody. And it's every year. It's every single year. The Penn State one is the one that I cannot wrap my head around. I would understand if they were, well, maybe not understand, but I could at least see the argument. If Penn State was one of those like perennial good programs, you know, and like maybe they snuck in a natty or at least a national championship appearance, you know, they haven't even done that. They don't beat the good teams on their schedules, and half the time they don't beat the mediocre teams that are on their schedules. Penn State is the same team every year, and how are they rewarded? They're the 4th highest ranked team in the country right now. I don't understand. I don't. That was Michigan State for a while. Michigan State would schedule Western Michigan, Central Michigan, Eastern Michigan, and Toledo, and then they would be 4-0 going into their first Big Ten matchup. And then that's it. That's the storyline. It's just a historic, undefeated Big Ten matchup. That's the Big Ten every single year. It is. Outside of, I will give credit where credit's due, when Ohio State was scheduling teams like Notre Dame out of conference. I'll give you that. You know, you scheduled a home and home with Notre Dame. But that's the Big Ten every year for me, man. And that was the one thing that I was worried about going into these rankings for the playoffs is how are they going to judge that? Are you going to reward teams for playing the equivalent of nobody, but they're just winning? Or are you going to reward teams that chose to have
doing that with the Big Ten, Trevor?
That's what I'm
they're
saying.
Not rewarding BYU for actually scheduling SMU non-conference and winning all their games. That's the thing. It is being they're purposely rewarding the Big Ten over other conferences. And here, ACC, top team in the ACC right now, record-wise, SMU. They have 1 loss out of conference. That was a 3-point loss to the current number 6 team in the country. That's not that much worse of a loss than Penn State losing at Ohio State. But the difference is SMU has actually won games against good teams. They went on the road and beat the current committee's number 19 team on the road. You know what I mean? Like, okay, so that right there, those 2 games right there are enough for SMU you argue they should be ahead of Penn State. Plus, they're a more dominant football team than Penn State is or has been for most of the season. And that's my frustration, Trevor, is it's only being applied to one team. Penn State, SMU this year has outscored their opponents by 18.3 points per game. Penn State so far this season has outscored their opponents by 17.2. Bigger margin of victory. Power 4 team, only losses to a undefeated top 10 team. Have a top 25 win. That's my thing is, you're correct, but they're only doing it in one direction, and it's the Big Ten. They're not, you say, well, they're rewarding Texas. True, but how much do you think they're rewarding Texas for going on the road and blowing out Michigan? You don't think they're, like, clearly the committee was impressed with Texas and Indiana beating Michigan. Clearly. Because that was enough to lead, like, to your point, you're at home against a 5-5 Michigan team, you barely win. You need a 4th down stop to win that game, and you leapfrog Tennessee, who has a win over Bama? Oh, wait, the committee chairs the Michigan AD. Now it makes sense. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a very clear conflict of interest when a current athletic director of a Big Ten team is voting on a playoff system where you get rewarded by having more teams in the playoff. Why are we talking about this? But you numbnuts want to run your mouths about Notre Dame. It's frustrating. Like, that's what our fear was, Trevor, is are they going to reward teams for playing soft schedules? And right now, the committee's rewarding teams that have played soft schedules. They are. And I don't like getting into what would this team's record be if they played Georgia? I hate that because that's the whole, well, if Notre Dame played so-and-so in a neutral field, they'd be favored to lose. Yeah, Notre Dame was favored to lose at Texas A&M. How'd that go? So don't care about all that. I don't care about who's favored to do what. What's your resume? You got to beat somebody. You got to beat somebody, and the committee's saying, don't worry about beating somebody as long as you win all your games and you're a Big Ten team. Like, that's what the SEC should be raising holy heck about. If I'm Greg Sankey, I'm calling up Tony Petitti or whatever that guy's name is. I'm saying, hey, after watching what's going on right in the playoff rankings, I want to put a pause on our little partnership because y'all aren't acting in good faith. You're not acting in good faith with what you're doing. You're not. And what's even dumber is the Big Ten gave their best team the toughest schedule in conference because they knew they could handle it. But then they gave everybody else this really soft crap schedule. Where the SEC was like, hey, year one of this new thing, we're going to have Georgia play these games. We're going to have Bama, Georgia, Texas. We're going to have, Oklahoma's going to play all these good teams. Like, we're going to put a good product on the field. You know what I mean? And Archer said, to be fair, Michigan and USC sucking this year didn't help. That's true. But Indiana was scheduled to play Michigan, not Penn State, not Oregon. Oregon was scheduled to play Michigan. That's it. They didn't get Penn State. My point is the SEC teams, with the exception of Texas, are playing like 3-4 really good games. USC has played Penn State. They don't play Oregon. They don't play Ohio State. They don't play Indiana. They tried to schedule USC into success as well, Trev. They gave them Michigan, and that's it. Penn State at home. Like, they tried to give USC a clear path too. USC was like, no, we're good. We want to suck. You know what I mean? So that's my issue. Is the Big Ten clearly scheduled in a way to try to get as many teams in there as possible with softer schedules, where the SEC is, we're going to try to get teams in there because we're going to have all of our teams play each other. They're going to go whoop teams out of conference, which they didn't, by the way, which I think hurts the SEC a little bit. And as I'm saying, the SEC is being punished for actually scheduling well, not just in conference either, Trevor. Look at what the SEC has done out of conference and compare that to what the Big Ten has done out of conference.
I think the thing that I don't like big picture is the precedent that the committee is setting moving forward. What motivation do teams have to go and schedule big marquee games? Like, if I can play IU schedule and just win, I'm winning convincingly. Well, you better beat Charlotte by that much. I'm winning convincingly. Well, you better beat UCLA by that much. Well, I'm winning convincingly. Yeah, you better be like, I don't want to just use IU as the example here because, like, Penn State has also played an ungodly soft schedule. And the best team that they played, they lost to. Surprise, surprise. But you're setting the precedent moving forward that the committee's not even favoring the type of win. It's just, you just win. Because you could make the argument with IU. It's like, oh, well, it's margin of victory. They're destroying folks. Okay, well, Penn State isn't. And Penn State is ranked higher than IU. And Penn State has a loss. So what's the precedent then? Is it we don't care if you play bad teams as long as you blow them out? Or are you just saying we don't care if you play bad teams, just win? Well, what if we play a good team? You can lose. As long as it's still a good team and it's only once. Okay. Do we have to play any of the ranked teams outside of that? No. You can still be the fourth best team in the country. Okay. So, it's frustrating. It's really, really frustrating. And in that sense, I do sympathize with the SEC because they're just like, yo, are we just going to be penalized for having the schedule that we have and having the same record as a team that has yet to play a team with no wins over an opponent with 6 wins yet? It is what it is.
It's worse than that because what you're doing is you're forcing the SEC to also schedule tough out of conference. And here's why I say that. It's the depth of the SEC currently compared to the depth of the Big Ten is such that if the SEC, it's almost impossible to schedule your teams for paths like Penn State and Indiana have. It's almost impossible. Because you can say, okay, well, in theory, the Big Ten has Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Oregon, USC, and Washington. 6 kind of relatively recent power teams. The SEC has Texas, Oklahoma, new, Bama, LSU, Texas A&M, Georgia, Tennessee, Florida, who's had some recent success and is a chance for a. Did I say Ole Miss yet? Ole Miss. I mean, the depth of that league is South Carolina. I mean, the depth of that league is significantly greater than that of the Big Ten, and even with all the new additions. And so it's easier to schedule away from losses in conference where the SEC can't avoid that. I mean, Bama lost to Vanderbilt for Pete's sake. You know what I mean? Like, who almost beat Texas. Not almost. They played Texas competitively. They didn't almost beat them. Like Georgia goes on the road and beats the mess out of Texas, but then they also have to play at Bama. They also have to play at Ole Miss. They also play Tennessee at home. Tennessee goes out and beats Alabama, but then they got to go play at Georgia, and they got to play at Arkansas. They got to play at Oklahoma. It's almost impossible to schedule an 11-win season in the SEC. Without doing it blatantly. So because of that, the SEC can't afford to say, well, we got a soft schedule. As long as we lose to Bama close, we'll be in. Because you can't guarantee that that's the only loss you're going to take, which means now we have to go schedule a good team out of conference because we have to try to, overcome the potential second loss with a big win out of conference, which only enhances your potential of losing, which we saw with Texas A&M getting beat by Notre Dame, with Florida getting crushed by Miami, with Georgia losing to Clemson in past years, right? But, like when they were playing in the mid-2010s. Georgia played Notre Dame. Georgia's going to be playing Ohio State, I believe, coming up soon. Didn't Ohio State and Georgia schedule a game here in the next 10 years? Right? So, like, that's the thing, Trev. And Texas is scheduling Notre Dame here coming up soon. So that's the thing is the SEC is almost in kind of a catch-22. If we have these much tougher in-conference schedules and we're beating each other up, we can't afford to schedule the crap that the Big Ten is scheduling out of conference because we won't have strong enough overall resumes. That's the problem. So you're backing the SEC to an even tighter corner in that regard. And I don't think you're going to like the outcome, because what it's going to do is you're going to do all this. And what's going to happen is you're now going to force the SEC to say, okay, we're going to schedule our top 5 or 6 teams for success. And we're going to have about 13 weeks of really crappy football. Part of what's made this season so good is the parity we've seen in the SEC, the ACC, the Big 12. It's the one conference with no parity. The Big 10, and we rarely talk about Big 10 games. They're getting viewed because Big 10 fans are there, but eventually they're going to stop because people are just going to be like, I'm tired of watching crap football. I don't give a crap about, USC playing Minnesota. I'm going to go watch the SEC game. I'm going to go watch the high-scoring Big 12 game. I'm going to watch, this, and that's the issue that I see with this, and that's what Greg Sankey needs to be railing against. Hey, Big Ten, how about you guys actually not do this and challenge yourselves and don't schedule like pansies? You know what I mean? Just give it a shot, see what happens.
Or at the very least, schedule your out of conference and just copy and paste what Ohio State's doing. Like Ohio State, like year in and year out, has scheduled a good out of conference game,
which is why I'm giving them a bit of a pass this year. Because this year's an anomaly year, and I think part of it's because they play Oregon on the road and Penn State on the road and Michigan.
Yeah, absolutely. But in 22 and 23, they played Notre Dame. In 2021, they played Oregon. So, like, I'll give you those for sure. But I just, 2020 is a weird season, so I always look at that season with an asterisk. But I'll never understand it. I think it's a bad precedent being set moving forward. But you're right. I mean, it's the product that the Big Ten is putting out on the field now. Like, just nobody cares. Nobody cares about a primetime matchup between Minnesota and Iowa. I don't care if they play for whatever they play for, the Paul Bunyan Trophy or whatever it is. Like, it's not fun, good football to watch. I'd rather watch South Carolina play LSU because that's going to be a better game. It's just, no, I'm with you.
Yep. Another one, when you look at it, Trevor, is this discussion between Georgia and Texas. That's a narrative that I find very compelling. And we're going to kind of wrap it up here soon. We're not going to get to some of the other things that we wanted to get to because we are going to go really long because we have a buy-sell hold coming up. But the Texas-Georgia thing, and I wanted to get your opinion on this, Trevor, is fascinating because Georgia last week was ranked ahead of Texas because they had the same record, and Georgia beat Texas at Texas convincingly, 15-point game in which they dominated for 4 quarters. I mean, Texas made like a little mini comeback, but Georgia shut it down pretty quickly, right? And say, well, how can Texas be ranked ahead of Georgia? And I'm like, listen, it's the issue I have is, again, it's that very narrow focus. It's not just about head-to-head. Head-to-head only matters if your overall resumes are similar, and your resumes are not similar because you have 2 losses in which you trailed by double digits. Texas has 1 close win all year. Would you agree with that, Trevor? Like, they really only have 1 close win all year. Like, every other game they've played has been not overly competitive. Would you agree with that? I mean, I count the 3-point win over Vanderbilt. They beat Colorado State by 52. They beat Michigan by 19, and it was not that close. They beat UTSA by 49, Louisiana Monroe by 48, Mississippi State by 22. Georgia only beat them by 10. They beat Oklahoma by 31. They beat Florida by 32. Georgia only beat them by 14. Like, if all you got is, well, we beat them, they have no top 25 wins. All right, cool. But it's about your overall resume. And eye test does matter. And Georgia has been winning ugly all year. Like, they've got 2 great wins. But they have played a lot more bad football this year than they've played good football. They looked great. They looked great in the second half against Clemson, looked great in the second half against Alabama, and they looked great against Texas. They looked like crap against Kentucky for the entire game. They sleptwalked through the Auburn game. Mississippi State gave them a game. Florida gave them a game with their 3rd-string quarterback playing over half the game, and they just went and got smacked by Ole Miss in a game that wasn't overly competitive, Trevor. I mean, Ole Miss had 396 yards of offense, 6.2 yards per play. Georgia had 245 yards of offense, 3.83 yards per play. I mean, Ole Miss had more passing yards than Georgia had total yards. It was a complete dominant game. Bama had them down 28-0 before they let them come back in that game. Like, the problem is, yes, you have the head-to-head. Yes, you've played a tougher schedule, but you have not looked very good against that schedule. If you put any other team's helmet and name on Georgia's team and had, let's just say SMU had the same exact resume that Georgia had, neutral site blowout over Clemson, beat Texas on the road, got smacked by Ole Miss, had a fluky comeback in a game where they were getting blown up by Alabama, barely beat Kentucky, barely beat Mississippi State, barely beat Florida. Do you think that people would be clamoring for SMU to be in the college football playoff right now? No, they wouldn't, because we have eyes. We see that Georgia's just not that kind of team right now. Do they deserve to be in the playoff if they beat Tennessee and win out? Yes, they do. They deserve to be in the playoff and go play somebody else on the road. I will say you can disagree. Feel free to disagree if you want, Trev. But when you have beaten Clemson the way that they beat Clemson, when you have beaten Texas on the road by 2 touchdowns, when you have beat Tennessee at home, however they beat them, and if they beat Georgia Tech, who's a good football team, that's a lot of really good wins. So you then can get in the playoff because you'll knock Tennessee out. But right now, today, you don't deserve to be in, but you can play yourself in. So that's why, like, Georgia fans, calm down. You're going to get a chance to play yourselves in. Just calm down. But right now, Georgia does not look like a top 12 team. They don't. And right now, they don't deserve to be in. That could change this weekend. But the eye test has to matter, Trevor. And the reality is outside of one set. I just refuse to let one weekend for a team define their entire season. That's true for Notre Dame. That's true for Georgia. That's true for Texas. That's true for Alabama. That's true for Ohio State. That's true for Oregon. That's true for everybody. You know what I mean? You have to let the entire season determine who you are. And right now, as of today, Georgia does not have a playoff resume. Oh, they beat Bama. You know, they beat Texas. Okay, well, let's put Vanderbilt in then because they beat Alabama. Just as convincingly as Texas beat Georgia, if you want to talk about game control and stuff like that. Right? Put Kentucky in. They beat Ole Miss, who beat the crap out of you, and Kentucky only lost to Georgia by a point. You know? So
I agree with you that they would deserve to be in if they beat Tennessee. I just don't know who they would pass.
Tennessee. They'd knock out Tennessee. They would rise up just a spot, and Tennessee would fall out.
Okay.
Because Tennessee can only live on that Bama win for so long. You know what I mean? Like that's all Tennessee really would have. They'd have wins over Chattanooga, a 5-5 NC State team, Kent State, the worst team in college football. They'd have a win over Oklahoma, who I think is 5-5 right now and has a chance to be 5-7 because they got to play Bama and LSU left. They have a loss to Arkansas, who right now is 5-4, has to play Texas this weekend and still has to play at Missouri. So they're going to be potentially at best 6-6. They lost to lost to Arkansas. They barely beat Florida by 6. They scrapped by Alabama. That's a good win. Had an ugly win over Kentucky, decent win over Mississippi State. Then they'll have to beat UTEP and Vanderbilt. They have a really ugly resume outside the Bama win if they lose to Georgia. Because right now you're hanging your hat on, they just had a bad day against Arkansas. But outside of that, they got to win over Bama. And hey, yeah, they're winning ugly, but they're winning. You lose to Georgia, and all of a sudden you don't have that type of resume anymore. Just like with Georgia, last week they're number 3. Right? Because they had that one really good win and then a bunch of, ugly wins. And then but once you got that second loss, we saw Georgia go from 3-12 quickly. And I think the same thing has happened to Tennessee. Because Georgia needs to go up, really 1 spot, 2 spots actually to get in because they would, if BYU wins out, then they'd be fine. But if BYU loses out in the SEC title game or a Big 12 title game, they could be in trouble. But because they're 12 right now. They're the first team out, right? As of right now.
Yeah.
So they need Miami and BYU to win the league and then beat Tennessee. So that would be my thing, Trev. Do you think Tennessee would stay ahead of them?
I don't know. I'm looking at everything as a whole. I do think Tennessee would drop below them, but then I go and look at Texas A&M is not out of the hunt yet for winning the SEC. Sure. SMU
Texas A&M, I think, would leap them if they beat Texas.
Yeah.
But then you'd say, okay, but then should Georgia be ahead of Texas? Because then they'd have identical records and Georgia'd have more wins and they'd have the head-to-head. Right?
Sure.
That's why I think there's still a lot to happen here. There's a lot that can go. We're in the Big Ten, you look at the remaining schedules and you're just like, okay, Penn State has to play Purdue and Minnesota and Maryland. Whoop-de-freaking-do. Indy, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Who's Oregon got left the rest of the way? I believe that's pretty soft, right? They don't play anybody.
Yeah, they only have 2 games. They only have 2 games left, anyways.
Yeah, I mean they've got Wisconsin and Washington. Who can you know what I mean? So the Big Ten's going to be sleep, and this is going to hurt the Big Ten when it comes playoff time, because outside of Ohio State, none of these teams are going to have been challenged in a while. You know what I mean? Big Ten's going to struggle in the postseason outside of Ohio State, in my opinion. I really believe that because they're just not challenging themselves. And all year we've seen teams that don't challenge themselves. That's what happened to Texas. They not on their it's not their fault. I think when you play Michigan on the road early in the season, you expect to be challenged. I don't think you expect that's going to be the year that they're down. But it just happened that they weren't challenged, and then they go play Georgia, and all of a sudden that speed of that game looks a little bit different. Look what happened to Navy. Navy was overwhelming teams, and then they play a team like Notre Dame, who's the first really good team they played all year, and it's just the speed of the game. Just they couldn't handle the speed of the game. You know what I mean? So I think a lot of those Big Ten teams outside of Ohio State are going to struggle in the postseason because they just haven't pushed themselves, and the league didn't push them. They haven't been challenged.
Sure.
Oregon, everybody's Oregon's going to face some team that's had to really battle in November and win a first-round game. Like, worst case for Oregon is like Bama, Georgia, Ole Miss. Some combination of those teams are in the 8-9 game. That, like, the worst case scenario for Oregon. Because, like, we haven't played a good game since we played Ohio State. We haven't played a good team since we played Ohio State in October. And we're going to be off for 3 weeks. Assuming they I don't even think they're going to beat Ohio State, to be honest with you. I think Ohio State's going to get the bye. But it's going to get – and now there's a scenario where Oregon in the first round has to play number 12 Georgia or number 12 Ole Miss. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's going to be interesting. And Penn State's going to have to play – if they're the 6th seed, number 11 Georgia or number 11 Bama or number 11 Ole Miss. You know what I mean? And it might not go well for the Big Ten. It just might not go well for those teams. So that's kind of my thing. But yeah, it's going to get crazy, Trev, if A&M beats Texas and Georgia wins out. There's going to be that debate after that week is going to be fierce. But I don't think it's much of a debate. I think at that point in time, Georgia would have a much better resume than Texas. But you guys, like, if they're both 10-2, and now the question is who plays in the SEC title game. But if they're both 10-2, and Georgia won the head-to-head by 15 at Texas, I don't, by only 3 points less than what Georgia lost to Ole Miss. Georgia's other losses to Bama, Texas' other losses to A&M. Georgia has two better losses than you could argue that Texas has. But right now, Texas belongs, and if Texas wins out, then they will stay there. If they don't, then they'll fall. That's what I think. All right, Trev. There's a lot we wanted to get to. Real quick, we wanted to do like this really cool what they got right, what they got wrong. We'll just quickly talk about it just briefly so we can get to the buy sell hold. Number one, we both agreed that Oregon and Ohio State should be 1-2. We felt that we were surprised, but they got it right to see Miami and Georgia drop. The one thing we wanted to get into was why did Georgia drop further than Miami? Because Miami was behind them, and then now they're ahead of them, even though Georgia lost to a better team. We think they corrected the Indiana, BYU, leaping Tennessee. You think both teams deserve to be ahead of Tennessee? I really only felt definitely good about BYU. I'm not necessarily against Indiana, but I just felt better about BYU because at least they have good wins. And we felt that jumping Ole Miss up higher was good because, yes, Ole Miss has 2 losses, but Ole Miss led late in both of those losses. They weren't bad. They were bad losses in that they lost to a not very good Kentucky team, right? But it wasn't like they got blown out. They were in more control of that game than Notre Dame was against Northern Illinois, for example. Because I actually said something wrong. I kept saying that Notre Dame never led Northern Illinois after the first quarter. That's actually incorrect. Notre Dame did take a 14-13 lead in the second half and then let Northern Illinois go down and kick field goal. So I keep forgetting about that. What they got wrong, we talked about the Big Ten. I felt beat Boise should be higher because they have a blowout win over Washington State, who's 18th. They also took Oregon down to the wire, and they've been pretty convincing in their wins. We felt that Colorado and Kansas State were ranked too high, that the Big 12 is getting too much credit beyond BYU. Trevor put a list together. They had, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They had 9. The Big 12 had 9 out-of-conference losses to other Power 4 teams, including TCU getting smashed by SMU. Colorado got smashed by Nebraska, who's a middle-of-the-road Big Ten team who just got beat by Indiana by 49. UCF lost to Florida, who's not very good. West Virginia lost to Penn State and Pitt. Illinois lost or Kansas lost to Illinois. It's actually a decent loss. Texas Tech got smashed by Washington State. Cincinnati also got beat by Pitt, and Houston got beat by Oklahoma, who's a middle-of-the-road, not very good Penn State team or SEC team. So They were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They were 6-9 against other Power 4 teams in the non-conference. I would rank LSU ahead of them. I would rank Louisville ahead of them, both of them. I would rank Clemson ahead of both of them. I mean, they should be in the 20s. They should be ranked, but they should be in the 20s. I mean, Colorado's best win this year is probably North Dakota State. Kind of says it all, right?
Them or Colorado State. I mean, I don't.
Your best wins over a non-Power 4 team.
Maybe Texas Tech, I guess.
Maybe. Who got destroyed by Washington State? Who you have ranked behind. Like, here's the thing. Washington State has one loss to number 13 Boise. They beat Texas Tech by 21 points. Texas Tech just knocked off one of your undefeated teams a week ago and just got, you know what I mean? Like, so it's like, okay, Washington State's win over Texas Tech was more convincing than Colorado's win over Texas Tech. You have a common opponent that Washington beat far more convincingly, and Washington has a better record. You know, so
and I believe 2 of the Big 12 teams didn't even play a Power 4 team.
Kansas State's best non-conference was against Tulane, and they only beat them by a touchdown. That's it. So, who was in the first month of their new staff? I would like to see that game get played now, the way the Tulane's playing now. So those are things, Trev, that we thought, and I felt that I feel SMU's undervalued. I think if Clemson had SMU's resume, they'd be probably a top 10 team. Same exact resume. You think they'd be 9th?
Yeah, I could see them being like a 9 seed if they had the orange and white. Yeah, I could see that.
Their only loss would be to a number 6 team in the country by 3 points.
Yeah.
You know, they'd have a road win over Louisville, that kind of thing. Yeah, I think they'd be a top 10 team.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they'd be a top 10 team. So, you know, I think they're doing that to position BYU to have a better win, but I think both of those teams are overrated. So overall, Trev, that was our takeaways from the playoff committee. Anything you want to add before we finish this up and get to our buy, sell, hold, Trev?
No, I think we covered most of it, man.
It's a good discussion. I'm frustrated because of what I'm seeing. And, you know, now you're going to have to root for like Minnesota to pull off an upset or Purdue to, I mean, you know, and the other thing I'm very curious to see, how are they going to handle Notre Dame and Penn State when they eventually have identical records and 2 common opponents? Because that's right now they have no common opponents, but by the end of the season, they will have 2 common opponents that will have played on the same exact field. Both games will be played on the same exact field. If Notre Dame's wins are more convincing, how does that impact Notre Dame's ranking against Penn State? Because if they don't change it, Trev, this is my whole point. Let's say Penn State beats Purdue, say 31-10. And let's say Notre Dame beats USC, 34-17, right? Notre Dame would have 2 far more convincing wins than Penn State, over common opponents that have more ranked wins than Penn State. The only justification you'd have is they have a better loss. That's a nonsensical way of ranking teams. So, yeah. Got a quick super chat from Gary L. Bryan, in your show with Bill Bender, you jokingly mentioned take the over in the Colorado versus Texas Tech game. I did. Thank you. You're welcome. Based on the $40 super chat, I'm assuming that you won, Gary, so I appreciate that. We also had a super chat from Craig Sebring. I'm having fun watching Notre Dame scoring and stopping teams and like the people hating us. I'll be honest with you. I kind of like it too. I'm enjoying clapping back at people because I just hope this team allows me to continue to do that for a while. You know what I mean? But it's fun, when you can look and say, boy, Notre Dame has gone on a stretch of really dominant play, man. This is fun to watch. Really fun to watch. Yeah. And hopefully they can keep it rolling.
Yeah. I'm enjoying it, man. I mean, it's just the farther Notre Dame gets away from September 7th, but the more opposing fan bases and people bringing up the Northern Illinois loss, that just tells me one thing. You don't want to play Notre Dame. You don't. All signs are pointing in that direction. And
Agree.
so if the September 7th game is what you have to bring up to help make it feel better that you're most likely going to play Notre Dame, whatever you got to do, partner. Whatever you got to do.
Yeah. Yep. I love it. Hit that like button, folks. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. Share this podcast. Give us a 5-star review. We would greatly, greatly appreciate that. If you've not done so, make sure you sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Guys, I promise you'll love what we've got. I had some linebacker recruiting intel on the board yesterday. We had a recap of the recruiting visits. I'll have some game breakdowns coming up the next day or two. It's just been super slammed, guys, with some business stuff. So I apologize for not getting that out sooner, but I will get even if it's super late, I'll get it out this week. But it's just one of the many, many reasons to be on the Irish Breakdown message board, which you can find at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So, Mr. Trowbridge, my friend, it is that time. It is time for Buy, Sell, Hold, Trevor. Are you sure you're ready for this one? After having to listen to all my rants, are you sure you're ready for this one?
Stay ready. Never have to get ready, Brian.
You stay ready. I love it. That's a great answer. All right, Trev, let's kick things off, man, with our dude older than dirt.
Fantastic. Buy, sell, hold from older than dirt. Notre Dame's offense will come out sharp on Saturday versus Virginia and look the best they have all year.
I'll buy that. I don't know if it'll be the best they have all year. I'll just kind of go with it just so I can make my other overall point. I think Virginia is a team that could potentially give Notre Dame some problems, but I actually think that this is the kind of game where Notre Dame is better positioned to thrive, because this is a physical defense, but a slow defense. And for the most part, Notre Dame has played relatively well against those type of teams. You could argue that Georgia Tech not so much, but I don't think that Virginia Tech Virginia's as good up the middle as what Georgia Tech was in the way that they played that game. So I do. I think kind of shaking off some of the rust against Florida State last week will help also. So yeah, I could see that. I'll buy that. Not that I'm predicting it's going to happen, but I could definitely see it happen because the matchup is just really favors Notre Dame. I mean, you saw that against North Carolina. That's probably the fastest offense that Virginia's played all year. They couldn't keep up. Who's the? I'd say Clemson is probably the third fast offense they played all year. Louisville is a fast offense as well, but you watch that game. Louisville was shook that game. They were struggling because of, they were coming off a couple, brutal losses to SMU and Notre Dame, and they were beat up football team in that game. But you saw what Clemson did to them. Clemson if Clemson can out-athlete you, Notre Dame can definitely out-athlete you on offense, no question.
Yeah, I'll buy that as well. I think it's going to be hard to top the Purdue and the Navy performances from like a point output standpoint, and Notre Dame played their most complete game against Navy so far this season. But matchup-wise, I agree 100%. It definitely has the potential for it to be.
True.
Absolutely. Another buy, sell, hold from older than dirt. The lack of starting seniors will also be a mitigating factor. How few guys are going to play their guaranteed last game at Notre Dame, not counting one-year transfers.
So I'm gonna sell this because actually Notre Dame in recent seasons has been really good on senior day. And I think part of it is this. I mean, last year they beat Wake Forest 45-7. There was a time, Trevor, like during a good chunk of the Kelly era, where Notre Dame just kind of sleptwalked through senior days. That hasn't been the case recently. 23, I mentioned the win over Wake Forest. 22, they beat Boston College 44-0. 2021, they beat Georgia Tech 55-0. So think about that. I'm going to add this up because I don't think I can do that math in my head quick enough. But 44 plus 45 plus 55 equals, they've outscored their last three ACC opponents on senior day 144-7. And then 2020, they played Syracuse on senior day, beat them 45-21. Syracuse scored late, if you remember, to make it that. 2019, they beat Boston College 40-7 on senior day. 2018, they beat Florida State 42-13 on senior day. You got to go all the way back to 2017 against Navy when Notre Dame didn't play very well on senior day, and they beat Navy 24-17. So, I think that the seniors have had a lot more to play for, and they want to go out with a bang, and that's become a different thing in recent years. So even at the end of the Kelly era, and certainly in the Marcus Freeman era, Notre Dame has been very good on senior day. And I think part of it's because Marcus Freeman's a pretty good motivator. And I think he uses senior day as a motivation for, hey, let's not just seniors, you go out and play, but it's also, hey, young guys, you make sure Riley Mills and Howard Cross go out as, champs or whatever. You know what I mean? You make sure that Mitchell Evans is this, and you make sure that Xavier Watts, for everything he's done, remembers his last game at Notre Dame Stadium. You do your part in helping him. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's part of it as well. So I'm going to sell that because I think Marcus Freeman has done a very good job. I mean, again, Trevor, I should note that in Marcus Freeman's tenure so far, Notre Dame has outscored their opponents 89-7 on senior day. If you want to include his 1 year as a defensive coordinator, you get to the 144-7. Since Marcus Freeman arrived at Notre Dame in some capacity, Notre Dame has beat three ACC teams 144-7 on senior day. I think they're good. I think the trends are pretty good.
Yeah, that's pretty decent. I agree with you 100%.
I'd say so.
Yeah. Buy, sell, hold from DK. The Big Ten and the SEC are basically guaranteed the number 1, 2, 5, and 6 seeds.
I'll sell that, Trevor. I think they're guaranteed 1 and 2, as they should be. I think a 2-loss SEC champ should be ranked ahead of an undefeated Big 12 champ or a 1-loss ACC champ, in my opinion. I do. Some may not agree with that. Barring an upset, well, actually, I don't even say barring an upset, because if Indiana beats Ohio State, then they fit into this conversation. But essentially, if the Big Ten plays out like we think it will, Trev, Indiana, you and I both agree that Ohio State will be in Indiana in next weekend. All right, so if it plays out that way, the loser of the Oregon-Ohio State game should be 5. No lower than 6. I could see maybe somebody sneaking up to 5 ahead of them if it's not, if it's a 10-point game. But barring it being a blowout, then I think it's, even if Ohio State loses again to Oregon in a very close game, I still say, look, they beat everybody else. They have multiple top 25 wins. They beat a lot of teams with a winning record. They just can't beat the number 1 team, but it's been close twice on neutral field and then at their place. They'll be no lower than 6, in my opinion, and rightfully so. I'm not punishing a team for playing in one of the big power leagues and playing well and just losing on a neutral field. I'm not going to punish you too much. I don't think the SEC is guaranteed the 5 or the 6. It could happen, but if Texas wins out, I don't see a 2-loss SEC team leapfrogging Notre Dame if Notre Dame keeps playing the way they have. I don't. Because if it was going to happen, it just would have happened. Like, Trevor, the next 3 games for Notre Dame are going to be tougher for them resume-wise than what they just kind of played this past weekend when we saw them move up and not get leaped by Bama or Ole Miss.
Right.
I mean, they're not going to drop Notre Dame below 2-loss Bama if Notre Dame goes out there and beats Army by 21 points, who they had in the top 25. All the computer models rave about USC. And especially if USC wins their next couple games, the quarterback change, it won't be considered a huge win. But if they go out there and handle business, I don't see Notre Dame falling behind one of those 2-loss SEC teams. Now, what could happen is Texas blows out A&M and then loses, let's say, like a barn burner late field goal to Bama. Then you could maybe make a case for a 2-loss Texas team being ahead of a 1-loss Notre Dame team because their second loss would have been in the SEC title game in a close game against a really good team. Is that fair? But it's far from a guarantee. Far from a guarantee. So I'm going to sell that.
I think it's interesting. I'm actually more erring on the side of buying it potentially because I think that depending on how things shake out, I think that, and now this isn't what I think should happen. This is what I think will happen. Like, let me preface this. Unfortunately, I have to make that distinction. So I think that no matter what happens in the Big Ten championship game, one of them will be number 1 and one of them will be number 5, or one of them will be number 1 and one of them will be number 6. So,
right.
If Ohio State beats Oregon, I think Ohio State's number 1, and then I think Oregon's number 5. I think if Oregon beats Ohio State back-to-back, Oregon's number 1, Ohio State's number 6. in that scenario, I think the number 5 seed, as crazy as this sounds, because the committee has shown me no otherwise that they wouldn't, I could see them doing something like putting Penn State at 5. I could see it. As frustrating as that is,
I didn't think about that, Trev. I thought you were getting ready to make an argument about one of the SEC teams would be number 5 or 6. I didn't even think about Penn State.
Oh no,
I did. Like you know what? You're right. You're spot on. I didn't even think about Penn State. I looked at it from 2 and 2.
Yeah.
Two Big Ten, 2 SEC. I didn't even think about Penn State. You are absolutely spot on.
Mm-hmm.
I think the only thing that could hurt. Can I say this? Can I throw that? Because dude, great response. Because I didn't even think about a third Big Ten team. Great response. Let me throw this at you. If Ohio State gets beat by Oregon again, do you think that hurts Penn State and drops them down if they don't blow out their next 3 opponents?
I think
it's like, okay, like, right? I mean, then that might be enough for Notre Dame to go up. If Ohio State gets beat convincingly, because, like, here's the thing. If Ohio State gets beat and they're going to drop Ohio State to 6, I don't see any scenario in which they move Penn State ahead of Ohio State. I think they'd almost be forced to put a Notre Dame up there at 5. Or a, you know, I don't know. Let's say Bama, just for argument's sake, just destroys their next couple opponents and goes and plays Texas in a 48-45 shootout that they barely lose. Like, I don't know. Or that they barely win. And Texas is now 12-2 or 11-2, and they barely lose to a Bama team that's just smoking hot. They blow out Texas. You know what I mean? Like, I think you'd almost that would be scenarios where that happens. But if Ohio State wins and Oregon loses, I think that's almost a guarantee that Penn State will be in the top 6 unless Penn State sleepwalks through their next couple of games. Because we do have precedents of the committee dropping a team who wasn't playing well and still winning. We saw that with Notre Dame. We saw that in some other games. TCU had a couple not so great wins late in the year before the Iowa State blowout, and they used that against them to kind of knock them a little bit. But did I even think about it? That's a great point, Trevor. I didn't even think about the third Big Ten team. You get what I'm saying? Like, I'm just sitting there thinking, like, there's no way a second SEC team is going to jump up in there. And I'm like, wait, because, like, you know what's funny? As you're like, I hate to say this, and I'm like, dude, haven't we been through this, Trevor? You just said that yesterday. I hate to say it, but I think they're going to put Bama or Georgia or Ole Miss ahead of Notre Dame, and I'm getting ready to, like, push back on you. Like, dude, you just said that yesterday. And then you hit me with the Penn State. I was like, whoa, hold on a second. Wasn't ready for that. So very well done. I was not expecting that at all. I really thought you were going to argue for a 2-loss SEC team. Like, dude, your SEC paranoia is taking over, Trev. We just learned that last night. I didn't even think about Penn State. Didn't even think about that one. That's a great point.
Yeah, and it's going to be one of those situations where Penn State might just get it by default. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like, I mean, if like it literally, like, they'll just be at 5th, and then all the stuff happens with the conference championship, and Penn State's kicking back, drinking coffee on their couch, like, we're still the 5th seed. Yeah. So what's up?
That's great. That's a great point. Hey, if Penn, let's just say for argument's sake, Penn State loses to Minnesota, just to make a point. Yeah. Do you then say, or let's say this, let's say Penn State was ranked correctly. Would you still buy this, or would you at that point in time sell it?
No, Penn State was ranked correctly. I'd sell it.
Okay.
I would. Like,
so
Penn
you could
State
see
is
Notre Dame or somebody like that.
Yeah, I would see Notre Dame sneaking up to 6, or, you know, I mean, depending on what happens in the ACC championship, who knows there. But yeah, I could see somebody if Penn State was ranked correctly, but that is barring that they are ranked correctly. Unfortunately, right now, the 4th team in the country, they're most likely going to win out. And the committee has shown that they don't even care about Penn State's margin of victory. They just want Penn State to win. So that's why I think that hopefully the committee kind of gets their feet under them a little bit. And if they watch Penn State play really poorly, you know, against Minnesota and against some of the remaining teams on their schedule, they're going to be like, okay, this is not the 4th best team in the country. But they beat Bowling Green by a touchdown, and they
So you're listening via podcast. We're laughing because Salty Virginia Peanuts just said, to be fair to Brian, nobody ever thinks about Penn State. Thank you. Thank you, Salty. I appreciate you, man.
That was good. That's
so what you're saying, Trevor, is if they play, now that people are watching them, if they play the next 3 weeks like they've played all year, they could fall.
Yeah. Should.
Because they're like, man, these guys aren't actually that good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, boy, goodness gracious. That was very well done, Trev.
Thank you. Buy, sell, hold from Coach Bent 574. The biggest reason Notre Dame is a semifinalist for the Joe Moore Award is not due to any member of the offensive line, but is due to Riley Leonard's elusiveness in the pocket and scrambling ability.
I don't think that's. I think I'm buying the point you're trying to make. I'm selling it because I think you're leaving out 4 words: Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price. 4 more words. I think it's all 3 of them. I mean, we've seen some times this year where, Jeremiah Love makes a unblocked defender miss in the backfield and then runs for 70 yards. You know what I mean? Like, we've seen these guys have some monster runs, but there's also been some big plays where the offensive line blocked it well. I mean, the 65-yard run against Florida State was great blocking, and Jadarian ran through it and hit it. The 60-yard run. You're starting to see them have more of those blocks, Trevor, in recent games. Where early in the year it was like Jeremiah and Jadarian just making monster runs, Riley shaking dudes off and doing some crazy stuff, and then in recent games, you have to admit, and you could say last few opponents have been great on defense. That's fine. We can have that conversation, but you're starting to see more big, long runs happening because they're opening up holes. The Navy run was that way. The long run against Florida State was that way. Riley scramble against Florida State was that way because Pat Coogan not having anybody block, and he goes and attacks that middle linebacker and takes that guy out so he can't make a play on Riley. You're starting to see that. Somebody in the chat, Gary L., tight ends are starting to block much better. They are. So you're starting to see them block better, but it's a lot about reputation. And to your point, Notre Dame has some elite athletes at quarterback and running back that are making the run game look better than it actually is, in my opinion. That's what I would argue.
Yeah, I think another facet of it, too, is the injuries that they've sustained this year. I think that is one thing that they're looking at that kind of evaluate all of this. Is you're looking at a Notre Dame team who so far this year has given up 12 sacks through 9 games. 3 of those weren't to the starting offensive line, and 3 of those weren't attributed to the starting quarterback. And they began the season without their slotted in left tackle, and they lost their starting center who was poised for a breakout season, 4 games in or 3 games in. And they were without one of their best offensive linemen, Billy Schrouth, for like 3 or 4 games. So I think injuries is also a factor in that as well. But I think it's all encompassing. I think there is some truth to Riley Leonard's elusiveness in the pocket, because I think if, somebody with the mobility of a Steve Angeli was a quarterback, that number would be significantly higher than 12, right? And if Notre Dame didn't have as an elusive of a backfield as a Jeremiah Love or a Jadarian Price, the stop numbers for defensive linemen going up against Notre Dame's would, I think, be a little bit higher. But I think it's all encompassing. I do think some of it's injury as well. But no, there is some validity to that, Coach.
Good point.
For sure.
And the second part of it, this is also proof that the award voters don't actually watch the games and just look at stats. That's the one thing I will push back on. Now, maybe right now, this early to get the finalists, the deeper list of finalists, maybe they're not watching as much film. But the one thing I respect about the Joe Moore Award, and I have disagreed with who they've given the award to multiple times. I felt that Notre Dame should have won. I think it was 2015. I think it was the first year. I thought Notre Dame should have won it in 2020. I didn't think Washington should have won it last year. I've disagreed with them, but the reason I respect that award so much, to be honest with you, Trevor, is because I know the dudes on that committee, and that's one of the things they pride themselves on is we don't just look at stats, we watch film. That's why that was the argument they made for guys. We watch film. They don't have great running numbers because they don't run the ball, but when they do run the ball, they're good at it. But they're great at pass blocking. That's the thing that drives that up. Blah 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 blah. I didn't agree with it, but I respected it. Right, and so. That's the one thing there's no award, in my opinion, that I respect more, even when I disagree with it, than this award, because I know these guys, they have football guys on that committee. They got guys like Aaron Taylor, and they have real football people on it. And I know for a fact they break down film. Now, again, maybe not for the top 10 finalists, but when they talk about who's going to win it, they do. But that's the one thing I'll sell that. Because I know these guys watch. Their O-line people are the biggest film nerds you'll ever meet in your life, and I love that about them. And that's why this award is actually handed out the way that it is because of that. And that's why Trevor, I don't have to agree with everything you say to respect the work you put into coming to that decision. We just see it a little bit differently. We both see something really good. You just think something's a little better than I do, and I think this over here is a little bit better than you do. Right? And that's one thing I do very much respect the Joe Moore Award, because I do believe that those guys put a lot of thought into their rankings. And I have a great deal of respect for their process. All the other awards, Lombardi and all that, like Quentin Nelson not getting it and all that, I mean, that's all. I don't give a rip about those awards, but this one I actually do still respect.
Yeah, I agree. Buy, sell, hold from Balpine Shillelagh. Given the current state of the SEC and Big Ten, it is likely that the best team in the Big Ten would beat the best team in the SEC. I'll go through these one at a time. So, yeah. Buy, sell, hold. The best team in the Big Ten would beat the best team in the SEC.
Who are we saying is the best team in the Big Ten? Are we going with Oregon right now? Just
probably Oregon. Yeah.
I'm going to sell Oregon. If Ohio State beats Oregon in a rematch, I'd probably buy that. But it'd still be a good game.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think Oregon beats Bama. I don't think Oregon beats Texas. I don't think Oregon they beat Georgia. Georgia's got major problems on defense. If anyone with speed is going to give Georgia major problems. But if it's Texas or Bama, I'd go with them. I think Oregon would score on Bama. I think it'd be a high scoring game.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying Oregon would smoke. I think Oregon's a very good football team. I go back to those SEC teams are going to be very battle tested. The reason I say Ohio State's the exception, not because I think Ohio State's some phenomenal team. I've seen recent Ohio State teams that are better than this Ohio State team. But that's true for most teams that are like, that's true for Georgia. That's true for Bama. It's just that Ohio State's I put a lot of value in being battle tested, Trevor. A lot. I put a lot of value in, you've been in these battles before. You know how to handle being behind. You know how to handle this. You know how to handle when your run game's not going, what you can turn to. You know how to handle when your quarterback's off, what you can turn to. All those things, you've had to experience those things. Oregon hasn't outside of the Ohio State game. And that's been a while now, especially when we get to the playoff. Ohio State's going to have been much more. They would have played Penn State since then. They will have played Indiana since then. They will have had a rematch against Oregon since then. And I just feel like they're going to, they're more battle tested. So that's where I'm at on that one.
Sure. Buy, sell, hold. The worst team in the SEC would beat the worst team in the Big Ten.
Who is the worst team in the Big Ten right now? Who would you argue is the worst team?
UCLA, maybe?
Not anymore. They just beat Iowa. They've won like 3 in a row.
Well,
yeah.
I mean,
right?
Purdue.
Purdue.
I
don't know. I don't know that I would say that's true, because I would like to see that game between Mississippi State and Purdue. That would be a very interesting game. Purdue's 1-8, but they've had a couple competitive games. Mississippi State's 2-7. Their wins are over UMass and Eastern Kentucky. Every Big Ten, every SEC game they've played has been by double digits. They've had a couple decent 10-point, losses to some decent teams, but Purdue took Illinois down to the wire, and Purdue should have beat Northwestern. Their head coach choked that game away. That was so bad. They should have flipping won that game. I was so mad about that. But so I just they've been more. They competed against against Oregon. They did. They just didn't have the horses, and then they competed against Nebraska in that game as well. And it was nothing at halftime. And it was 7-3 going in the fourth quarter. And then Nebraska kind of poured it on late with an interception return and it was a competitive game for a while. So I'll go Purdue actually on that one. So I will, I'll sell that. Mississippi State's awful. Y'all know they got destroyed by Toledo.
Yeah. And then finally, buy, sell, hold. A mid-pack SEC team would beat a mid-pack Big Ten team. And if this helps, I have their conferences pulled up here. Mid-pack, Big Ten team, you're looking at
18 teams, right? So let's go to the ninth team. SEC is an 18 as well, right? Are they both at 18?
I'm not sure. The 9th team in the Big Ten is 5-5 Washington.
Actually, the SEC is at 16. So let's go with the number 8 team in those two leagues.
The 8th team in the SEC is 6-3 LSU. The 8th team in the Big Ten is 5-4 Wisconsin.
Who lost to USC? Mm-hmm. Who beat LSU? I mean, look, if USC and LSU played again today, I think LSU beats them. I do. I'll say yes. I'd buy that because again, it's just yeah. I'll buy that. It'd be close. Look, I think the SEC and the Big Ten have some like they're not super far off. The Big Ten's overrated because the Big Ten chose to not challenge their teams. That's the problem. There's some decent teams in the Big Ten. I mean, Nebraska looked like gangbusters till they had to start playing Big Ten teams. You know, you know what I mean? Like, it's just you've situated things to where you're not doing what you need to do. So, yeah, I mean, I think they'd be competitive games. It's a pick 'em in my opinion. To be honest with you, Trev, it's a pick 'em.
Yep.
Somebody just said LSU just got dog walked, but Wisconsin not having their QB really sets them back. Yeah, they got dog walked, but they got dog walked by a top 10 team that would smash everybody in the Big Ten not named Ohio State or Oregon. You know what I mean? Like, who played Wisconsin and dog walked them too. Yeah. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
Buy, sell, hold from BK's last brain cell. First buy, sell, hold. Notre Dame would have a harder time with Colorado than they would Miami.
Sell.
Sell.
Like major sell.
Sell.
It's an interesting premise, but here's the deal. Miami can run the football. Colorado can't. No. Colorado's had trouble protecting Shedeur Sanders all season against Big 12 defenses. Notre Dame would eat him alive, and he would have never seen a secondary like he'd face against Notre Dame. They can't run the ball to protect him the way that Miami could. And Miami's defense is not very good, in my opinion. It's better than Colorado's, in my opinion. I think Colorado might have some better numbers, and they're playing better lately, but the Big 12 is not very good. No. It really isn't. It really isn't. So sell that harshly.
Yeah, hard sell for sure. Another buy, sell, hold. Miami offense would give Notre Dame more trouble.
I think we answered that one. That's a buy. Mm-hmm. So what he's thinking is basically Colorado would have a much better defense than Miami, and then based on that. But I would I'll buy that.
And buy, sell, hold. Jordan Clark wins versus Xavier Restrepo, and Travis Hunter gets the best of Christian Gray.
Buy, sell. He'll make some plays, but overall, he won't get the best of them. I mean, Travis Hunter's a very good wide receiver, but Christian Gray's played some very good wide receivers this year, so sell. And then the last
final
one
buy, sell, hold. Yep. Notre Dame wins both games by minimum 2 scores.
I'll buy it because I think they beat Miami by 10, at least 10. So that's 2 scores. So, yeah, I'll buy that.
Yeah.
At least by 9, right? At least by 9. I think they would destroy Colorado. Miami would be a more competitive game because Cam Ward. It's like, here's the thing. If you pressure Shedeur Sanders, you're going to be able to throw him off his game. You can pressure Cam Ward, and there's no promise that he won't do to you kind of what Caleb Williams did a couple years ago when you were getting pressure on Caleb and he was making you miss and going running around and making throws down the field. Cam Ward would have a much better chance of doing that than Shedeur. The flip side is Shedeur's not going to turn the ball over like Cam would either. So like it's a debate worth having. I just personally in a situation like that would be more concerned about the guy that has a better all-around supporting cast and a guy that's got a team that's got the more mobile quarterback. That's where I would go with that one. I just think Cam's got a better supporting cast, better O-line, better running game, and he's more mobile as far as the escapability standpoint. Like Shedeur can tuck the ball and move the chains and he's not a stiff back there athletically. He's just not real good at avoiding pressure the way that Cam is elusively. Like he can shake off. He's a pretty strong kid, Shedeur is. But he's not shaking off Riley Mills and, the guys in Notre Dame's going to throw at him.
Agreed.
So, it's good submissions, though. Kind of make you think a little bit. I like those.
Yeah. Buy, sell, hold from BK's last brain cell. BYU, Penn State, LSU, IU all would lose to Notre Dame if they played this week.
Buy. Yes.
Yeah.
That's easy.
Yeah, absolute buy. Buy, sell, hold. Notre Dame would hold them all under 21 points and less than 200 yards passing.
I'm going to sell that because I think LSU and Indiana would both get over 200 yards passing. If at the very least, because of mop-up plays and snaps. So they would hold BYU to definitely BYU. Like BYU's offense would have a very tough time against Notre Dame. I just also think BYU might be able to somewhat keep Notre Dame's points down a little bit because of their physicality. If Notre Dame can't throw the ball, Penn State would be able to keep Notre Dame's points down a little bit because their defense is really good. But I think Notre Dame would eat Drew Aller alive. And Penn State has no kind of BYU's pass catchers at receiver. Now, Tyler Warren's really good, but BYU's receivers scare me more than Penn State's receivers do. And their offensive line would have some problems with Notre Dame, in my opinion. LSU, I think Notre Dame would score a lot on them, and they would eat Garrett Nussmeier alive. Indiana, Indiana to me would be the toughest matchup of these four because they've got a pretty gritty defense and they've got a very veteran quarterback and decent pass. Like they would, to me, would be the biggest challenge of those four because it's about matchups. Not that they're the best team; it's the matchups would be more concerning for me. I'm a believer in Indiana as being a really good football team after watching them play last couple of weeks. I am. I didn't grow up in Indiana, so I don't have that IU hatred like I think some people do. So I think maybe that's why I can look at it that way, but they would concern me the most. I don't think they'd hold LSU in Indiana. I mean, LSU at the very least would get over 200 passing yards in mop-up minutes because they throw the ball. They throw the ball 50 sometimes, Trevor. I mean, you only have to average 5 yards an attempt at 45. You know what I mean? Like that. Like they'd get over 200. Yeah.
Buy, sell, hold from I Am Tenzin. No senioritis on senior day. Big blowout.
Buy.
Yeah. If history tells us anything, it's definitely a buy. For sure. Buy, sell, hold. Go Army. Beat Navy.
Hold of all of our military. I respect all of them. I'm not going to get into that go Army, beat Navy, and the Navy people trying to get me beat. I love all of them. I love all the people that make the choice to serve our country and fight to protect our rights and our freedoms. So I hold. I love all of them. Cop-out answer. It's also a cop-out answer. I'm going to be honest. It's a cop-out answer, but it's also true.
Good answer. Buy, sell, hold. I Am Tenzin. If ever invited back, you'd join Tiger Bait on a podcast.
As long as they said that, hey, we want to have an honest discussion, I'll never avoid a podcast. If somebody's like, hey, we want to have a grown-up conversation, I'll go on with anybody. I'll go on with Tiger Bait. I'll go on with Blake Ruffino if he's willing to have a grown-up conversation. Sure, I'll go on with anybody. No doubt. I actually sent Preston a message the other day. I said, look, man, I'm not going to be getting in your it's like I almost kind of feel like I said, I'm not going to be jumping in your post-game shows anymore. You know what I mean? And explain to them why so many Notre Dame fans are like the way that they are. It's like if you guys would just admit that you were wrong and you guys acted like kind of jerks when you went at Notre Dame fans for the pettiness that you said about us and were more aggressive coming to me after I was off the show than when I was there. There's some things there, but I was like, I think they've suffered enough. You know what I mean? Like we've gotten after them enough. I also think they probably still don't want us to leave because LSU fans aren't watching their show anymore because they're just like Notre Dame fans. When they keep losing, they're pissed off. They don't watch anymore. They need Notre Dame fans to help them make some money. So, but just so you guys know, I won't be dropping in any more Tiger Bait post game shows to troll those guys. I've had enough. It's almost like it's so embarrassing right now. It's almost not even fun anymore. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? It's like it's so obvious that I'm right. It's not even about Kelly. It's not even fun anymore. You know what I mean? Like, because they're never going to admit it. They're never going to admit that we were right. They're never going to admit that I was right. The first 2 times I was trolling, they didn't even believe it was actually me. They thought it was somebody that was using my name, and it wasn't me. But I'd go back. Yeah. Somebody said BD awesome. Taking his foot off the gas. Yeah, I am. It's not that I'm taking my foot off the gas in the fourth quarter. The game's over. I mean, that's what again, Bama ended the game. It's over. You know, some guys, they're rebuilding. I was like, bro, when you're rebuilding, you don't get worse every year. Oh, we beat Bama year 1. Yeah, and then the next year lost to him by 14, and now you lost to him by 29. That's called regression, not rebuilding. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah.
Buy, sell, hold from South Side Chirish.
I think Chirish, like Chicago,
Chirish.
Chi-town,
Okay.
Chi-town, Chirish.
Oh, okay. Southside Chirish. All right. Notre Dame will fill out its 25 recruiting class with the prospects currently known to have offers publicly and will not have to expand to a new group of recruits deeper on their board.
Buy. Yeah, I buy that. I'll get into more on that in a later question, but yeah, I definitely buy that.
Buy. Yeah. Another buy, sell, hold from Southside Chirish. A 2-loss SEC champion gets the 3 seed behind an undefeated BYU, assuming Oregon wins the Big Ten.
It's possible, but I'll sell that because I don't know that. I still think let's say Bama runs the table, gets into the SEC title game, beats A&M or beats Texas. I think that team would get the 2 seed over the 3 seed. I do. Now, perfect world for Notre Dame, that would actually be kind of good because if Notre Dame's got a better shot at getting a 7 seed than they do a 6 seed. So if BYU jumps up to number 2 and Notre Dame's the 7 seed, then that means Notre Dame would play BYU in the second round and wouldn't get the Bama whoever winner, Texas or whoever winner until the semis. So nice. Yeah, I'd take that. I'm still selling it, but I'd take it, buddy. Take it in a heartbeat.
Same.
This is a new member to the board, by the way, Trev. So he signed up this week, and boom, hitting up the buy, sell, hold. So very well done, B Jammin 41. Love it.
Let's go. Okay. Well, buy, sell, hold from B Jammin 41. First one, probably definitely not the last. Notre Dame will have no offensive, defensive, or special teams records broken this season, but this Notre Dame team will go down as one of the most complete teams since Lou Holtz.
I don't know of any records that Notre Dame is on the verge of breaking as a team. I'd have to go back and look at this. Like the sacks record, I don't think that Notre Dame is going to be close to breaking that one. You know, like they'd have to rack up so many sacks or play so many games that it just becomes a longevity thing. Like rushing, I mean, the only thing that I could say is I do think there's a chance that they could break the all-time scoring record. It'll be tough. If they average 45 points a game, the next 3 games, they'll break the regular season scoring record. Because they'll actually a little less than that. Because that 45 the next 3 games would get them to 40 on the season. But the scoring record was set last year. So I'll buy it, though. I mean, that's a lot. I'll buy that. And I don't know that you're going to be able to average 45 against Virginia, Army, and USC. We'll see. But if this team runs the table and continues to play the way they are, could this team end up going down as the most complete team since the Lou Holtz coach teams? Absolutely, it has a chance. Now, there's still a lot of football left to be played, right? So this assumes that the team keeps playing the way that they are. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't know what records they have set up to be broken, but as a complete team, sure. I mean, this defense alone is insane.
Yep. I mean, but they've had some teams like Trevor, the 66 team. Like, this is why it's so hard to, I mean, that's considered modern record, right? So that's post-World War II. That 1966 team gave up 3.8 points per game. They gave up 21, 28. They gave up 38 points the entire season. Like, Notre Dame will never touch that. Never touch that. So that's defensive. It's a lot easier to set offensive records in modern football than it is to set defensive records for your team, unless your team used to suck for a long time.
Sure.
Yep.
Buy, sell, hold. Another one from B Jammin 41. I was correct. That was not his last one. Since a good amount of Notre Dame players are from warmer weather states, especially on offense. A cold home playoff game in South Bend might not be the home field advantage most fans think it will be.
Sell. Acclimation is a big part of that. It's about, you can't, if you're playing in Florida, Texas, Georgia, unless you're playing in parts of Texas that get snow, because there are parts of Texas that get cold and get snow. We've seen, heck, Notre Dame played in the Sun Bowl back in 2010 and it got snow, and the Miami players are just covered in beanies and stuff, and the Notre Dame players, who had a lot of guys from the South, were just fine because you get acclimated, you practice in it. You know what I mean? You're prepared for it. Now, when in December, when Notre Dame's getting ready to go play a bowl game down south, do they spend most of their practices indoors? Sure, they do, because they don't need to prepare for the cold. If Notre Dame's getting ready to play at home against a team from the South, you better believe that they're going to have some practice time outside, no question. So absolutely believe that the acclimation piece is there. It's not that you're not cold anymore. You're just more used to playing in the cold. And that's really what it boils down to. So I sell that. Definitely sell that. There's just certain things you can't replicate, Trevor. Like, you can't replicate 110 screaming people. You can talk, you can't replicate. You can prepare for it, but you can't replicate it. You can't replicate if it rains on Saturday and it doesn't rain all week. You can do some things, wet the balls, but you can't wet the whole field to where you're slipping and sliding. You know what I mean? Like, there's just certain things you can replicate, certain things you can't. And if you're a team, let's say Miami's coming up to play Notre Dame, there's nothing they can do to replicate playing in the cold. Nothing. Unless they want to come up here and practice for a week, which wouldn't be a bad idea. But are they going to want to do that? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say too, like, in terms of being acclimated to the weather, these players live up here, right? Like, they live up in Indiana and they live up in South Bend for, I mean, arguably over 50% of the year. Right. And most of the time that's not in the summer.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm with you.
And they spend even more time of hot time back home than they do cold time.
Yeah.
They only get to go home for a couple days during the cold time of the year. They're here, because when Notre Dame's in bowl games, they're here for most. They'll go home a little bit in December, but they won't get that kind of off time this year because the game happened so quickly. They won't have time to go home for as long for those type of things. It's a fair question, be jamming, but I still sell it.
Buy, sell, hold from Salty Virginia Peanuts. The Irish have discovered an additional offensive tactic: multiple passes to the Great One in a series. In Mr. Leonard's last 2 touchdown drives, the Great One accounted for 30 of 36 yards on 1 drive, 2 passes, and 45 of 65 yards, 3 passes, 1 PI on the other. This tactic will be a difference maker in their upcoming playoff wins.
I mean, he's a Jaden Greathouse homer, but he's not wrong, Trevor. I mean, look, getting Jaden Greathouse and Mitchell Evans more involved in the offense, to me, is the secret sauce to Notre Dame really taking that next step.
Sure.
Because I think it forces teams to defend you differently, which then opens up more opportunities for Bo Collins and Chris Mitchell and KK Smith and Jaden Thomas outside. It does. I buy it.
Yeah, right. I buy it too. It's going to make the offense more multifaceted. It's an additional playmaker that you're going to have to defend. Yeah, I'll buy it. Buy, sell, hold from Traverse City, ND. Oregon will enter the playoffs as the number 1 seed.
Sell. I think Ohio State beats them in the rematch.
Buy, sell, hold. LSU will lose another regular season game.
This one, Trev, I'm not. I don't think LSU is going to quit on Brian Kelly. And they really just got to get through this weekend against Florida. I think they beat Vanderbilt at home. I think they beat Oklahoma at home. And yeah, Florida's playing better, but there's another question about if DJ Lagway plays. I mean, yes, LSU has the bad loss to Alabama, but none of the other teams they play are Alabama. They're more, I don't know, man. I feel like if I say buy, it comes across as like, bias because I dislike BK. And he He'll buy. They, like just be in practice. Just 'cause I'm trying to not sound like a BK hater, but here's the problem: 2 of their last 3 quarterbacks they play are mobile dual threat quarterbacks, and they've really had a hard time defending mobile dual threat quarterbacks. The Diego Pavia kid, if DJ Lagway's healthy, the question for him is how mobile will he be, which is fair. It's very fair, but just between one of those two, it's possible. And if they play poorly against Florida, even if they win, where's their heads going to be when they, against Vandy? I think this is a very immature LSU team that I could see, Yeah. I wanted to sell it because I just don't want to come across as like a BK hater, which, I mean, everybody knows I am, but I don't want it to cloud my analysis. I think I've always been able to be fair. Like, who's the only person on the IB staff that my wife still pissed at me about this, but I'm the only person on the IB staff to pick them to beat Ole Miss because I just thought they were going to beat. I mean, I'd still try to be fair, but at the end of the day, it's really analysis. They struggle with mobile quarterbacks, and 2 of their next 3 quarterbacks are mobile quarterbacks. That's just what it comes down to. So I could see them losing another game. And I was going to say, well, they've only lost to good teams. But I'm like, nope, USC beat them. And they don't even have a mobile quarterback. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I don't know. What do you say, Trev?
I'm going to buy it just because I think Vandy has one more trick up their sleeve this year. I think the Fighting Clark Lees are going to – yeah.
Could you imagine? Oh, dude. Could you imagine if Elko and Clark Lee both beat Brian Kelly in the same year?
Oh, yeah.
And then Freeman beat Elko?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, great.
Oh, yeah. That's why I'm buying it. That's why I'm buying it, baby. The Fighting
goodness.
Clark Lees have one more trick up their sleeve, and everybody's like, maybe it's going to be
awesome.
Yeah. No, I think Vandy pulls out one more, and it's an upset in the swamp. Or not in the swamp, in Death Valley.
Awesome.
Yeah, upset in Death Valley.
That would be so awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, so awesome.
And knowing LSU's home draw, I bet they make that a night game too, because it feels like just every LSU home game. Yeah.
I hope it's a noon game because that crowd does not show up for noon games at all. At all.
So I'm buying it. Vanderbilt upset. You guys heard it here first on the Irish Breakdown podcast on November 13th.
Love it.
Thank you. Another buy-sell hold from Traverse
scrap
City.
the show if it ends up being wrong. He's going to try to delete the show like he did my run game breakdown.
I'll text you.
LSU fans, clip this segment unless, because we may have to delete it if they win.
I'll text you at 1 a.m. again. It's like, I don't know what happened, man. It's just not.
I don't know how this got deleted, but it accidentally got deleted.
Yeah, I went to like it. I swear to God. Buy-sell hold from Traverse City, ND. Because you told me to ask again after the Florida State recruiting weekend, Notre Dame will finish this class with 27-plus recruits, including 4 linebackers and 4 wide receivers.
All right. So I'm going to sell this because I don't think that Notre Dame is going to have 4 linebackers in this class. I would encourage you. I know you're a member of the message board, so I would encourage you to, unless somebody stole your avatar here and uses it over there, but I'm pretty sure you're a member of the message board. I buy the 27 plus. They're at 24 right now. I think they'll get at least 3 more. There may be some other things that happen and get into that down the road, but yes, 27 plus I buy. 4 receivers I buy. 4 linebackers I sell. I think they're gonna get 3 linebackers.
Fair enough. Buy, sell, hold. Steve Angeli will not take another live snap at Notre Dame.
So he's going to play in at least 1 more game this season. At least 1 more.
Yeah, I think he's going to play on Saturday.
I agree.
I sell.
The next 2 games could be a little tougher, but this one I think he plays in.
Yeah, I agree. Buy, sell, hold. Audric Estime will break out in the second half of the NFL season after being named the Broncos' new RB1.
Honestly, I've said this before. I don't really pay a whole lot of attention to the NFL. I did see that Audric kind of had his most usage this past weekend, I believe, against the Chiefs. I thought I saw the statistically. I thought he led them in rushing. He had 14 carries for 53 yards. I think he led them in rushing against the Chiefs this past weekend. He did, yeah.
I think Javonte got hurt.
Yeah, he had 1 carry. If Audric plays well, I'll buy that. I'd love to see that happen. Just for Audric's sake. I'm not a Broncos fan anymore, but although Trev, I'm still an old school Broncos fan. I'm not a fan of the new team. Like this is what I've realized because like last night was I'm working, I had a 1987 game on YouTube between the Broncos and the Bears on my TV. And if y'all have not seen that game and you want to know why I think Elway, if I could take anybody, I'd take Elway. Go watch that game. And like he was doing ridiculous stuff in that game. So the Broncos are still my team. Like the John Elway Broncos are still my favorite team. The current NFL, I just don't care. Just don't care about. So
I'll buy that, Traverse City. I mean, I'm going through and I'm looking at their schedule. They play the Falcons at home. They play the Raiders, who don't have a good defense. Then they play the Browns at home. They play the Colts at home, who have an abysmal run defense. They play the Bengals coming up. I could see that. I could see Audric breaking out. And Sean Payton's a very old school style head coach in the NFL right now. So, yeah, I'll buy it. One, because I think he has the opportunity to do it. And two, I just really like Audric Esme. It'd be cool to see another Notre Dame alum break out at running back in the NFL, kind of join the reins there with Kyron Williams. Should be a lot of fun. Buy, sell, hold. Texas A&M will win the SEC this year.
Sell. I just don't think A&M has enough horsepower to do that. I'm less confident in A&M. It's funny as all these A&M fans are like, now that we've got Marcel Reed, I actually think their chances of beating Texas decrease with Marcel Reed at quarterback. I think the way Coach Elko, who I have a great deal of respect for, barring something that I don't know happening off the field, like in the film room, attitude-wise, locker room, barring something like that having happened, I don't think Marcel Reed gives them the best chance to be successful. I don't. And so I hope I'm wrong. Really hope I'm wrong, because that'd be huge for Notre Dame. But I'm selling.
Yeah, I hope I'm wrong too, but I'm also selling. I'm with you.
Yeah.
Buy, sell, hold. Boise State will get the number 4 seed due to Colorado winning the Big 12.
Well, I mean, look, if Colorado wins the Big 12, Boise will get the 4 seed. Same thing if Kansas State wins the Big 12, Boise will get the 4 seed. Yes, I just don't think Colorado's going to win the Big 12. I don't.
Yeah. I'm selling that because I don't believe Colorado will win the Big 12. But in that scenario, that I think that's what will
now
happen.
Here's the thing. I actually think if they got to the Big 12 game, they would win it. I think they would beat Colorado, BYU in that type of environment. I don't think they're going to get there. I think they're going to lose to Kansas or Utah or Oklahoma. One of those 3 teams will beat them, in my opinion. But yeah.
Sure. Buy, sell, hold. Mitchell Evans will catch 3+ touchdowns to end the regular season.
Sell. He's never been a touchdown guy. He had the one, and I don't know why that is, but he obviously had the one on Saturday. I think that's his only touchdown catch of the year, I believe, Trev. And he only caught one last year. As good as he was, he only caught one touchdown last year. That was against Louisville late in the game. And then he only caught one touchdown the year before against South Carolina. For whatever reason, he's just not a touchdown guy. So now all of a sudden he's got 3 for his career. All of a sudden he's going to have 3 in the last 3 games. I'm going to sell that. But if I'm wrong, Trevor, Notre Dame will annihilate their next 3 opponents. Unless he does it all in one game. You know what I mean? So
yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I'm going to sell it just because that's not the kind of player he is. But if he does it, this Notre Dame team is putting up 50+ points.
Yeah.
I mean, that's. Hope you're right. Buy, sell, hold. Notre Dame will go to the portal this year for the following depth quarterback, boundary wide receiver, defensive tackle, nickelback, and place kicker.
Sell on depth quarterback for now. Buy on boundary receiver. Buy on defensive tackle. Buy on nickel. Buy on place kicker.
I think I'm going to buy on all of them.
I think if they only lose one guy from the current roster, I think what they would do is move Tyler Buckner back to quarterback.
Okay.
You couldn't do it immediately. You had to have that grace period where Tyler had to kind of win his teammates back. But I think he would accept his role. He would understand you're not starting quarterback anymore. Like it's going to be a battle between CJ and whoever else stays. But between whoever stayed plus Anthony Rizak plus Tyler Buckner plus Blake Hebert, at that point in time, I don't think you'd need to go to the portal.
Fair enough. Yeah, that makes sense.
If you lose two guys, you may have to go to the portal.
Fair enough. Okay. No, that makes sense. Okay.
And I don't think they're going to lose two guys. I think they will only lose one as of right now. If they lose any at all, they may not lose any.
Fair enough. Buy, sell, hold. One of the true freshman 2025 class defensive backs will start game 1 next season.
Buy. Yeah. Whether it's Dallas Golden as a nickel or Jadon Blair as a safety or, Brandon Logan as a nickel. Mark Zachary is yes, 100%. Like here's the thing. Based on the current plan, Jadon Blair is going to follow the CJ Carr route of being like an early enrollee, which means he gets to practice with the team. So if Notre Dame makes the playoff and hosts a game, well, even if they don't host a game, but if Notre Dame makes the playoff, he gets about a week of practice. Probably would be acclimation, probably wouldn't be any contact, stuff like that, because he'd be on the team, he'd probably go through conditioning and all that. If they make a run beyond that, then Jadon Blair gets to practice that entire time. Like CJ did last year. He doesn't get to play in the game, but he gets to practice. So you'd have him in there running scout team. And even if he can't practice, he's going to be in all those meetings, all that install, watching the coaching, and FYI, he's a friggin' beast of a player. So I could definitely see that. 100% can see that. Yep.
Yeah. My answer is going to be Jadon Blair at safety. So
between him and Dallas Golden, I'll be shocked if one of them's not starting.
Sure.
Yeah. Very, very shocked. Good one. Mm-hmm. There we go.
Buy, sell, hold. Detroit Hunter. Riley Leonard seems to have the most confidence in Jaden Greathouse.
Still a sell for now. That could change. We could see more of that. But up until this past game, he was still like 2 targets a game and call it a day. I mean, and let's be honest too, some of the targets from this game were you have no choice but to throw the ball to Jaden Greathouse. You know what I mean? Like they were screens and they were slot fades. And I think Mike Denbrock did a really good job of putting Jaden Greathouse in a position to be the primary target in this game because I think Mike Denbrock knows he's got to get Jaden Greathouse and Mitchell Evans going. I think that was very intentional by him. I still think Riley probably still leans more toward Bo Collins, but I could see that changing in the future. But as of right now, I still think Bo is the guy he probably has the most confidence in as of right now. But that's starting to – I'm not nearly as comfortable buying that now as I was a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I think the balance is slowly starting to level out a little bit, I think, week over week. Plus, you never know if Mitchell Evans continues to be on the upward trend that he was on based on last game, he might start putting his name in that hat too. So you never know. Buy, sell, hold, again, from Detroit Hunter. If IU loses, they will fall out of the top 12.
That depends on how bad they lose. If they play Ohio State down to the wire, we just learned with Penn State that it doesn't matter. You haven't beat anybody. If you lose a close game to Ohio State, and Penn State did that at home, Indiana would do this on the road. So no, they definitely won. If Ohio State just blows the doors off of Indiana, which we have no evidence they'll do, then that would knock them out. That would knock them out.
Yeah, it depends on the manner of the loss. I mean, because the thing that they're clinging on to right now is the fact that they are outside of Michigan this past weekend, decimating the teams that they're playing. So if the first ranked team that they go and play, they lose by 20, I think that would make them fall out of the top 12. But if it's a 4-quarter game, final score is like a 31-24, like if they play in a game that kind of resembles like Notre Dame Louisville, final score is 31-24, and something like that, I could see them keeping them in the top 12. But
If
guy.
they don't, the committee will lose all respect because
Yeah.
you can't say, well, hold on a second. Joe, that the reason you have Penn State where you have them is because of their loss at home, but Indiana plays them just as competitively on the road, is far more dominant in every other game, and you're going to drop them way down when you rewarded Penn State for losing to Ohio State? Nah, bull crap. Bull crap. They will lose all credibility. But also, we've seen the Big Ten bias. As long as it's a close game, they're going to want to keep that fourth Big Ten team in there. 100%. 100%. Not saying they should. I'm saying that's what will happen.
I mean, shoot, if they take the Penn State route, IU might move up in the rankings. Who knows at this
That's
point?
true if it's a close game.
I say sarcastically, but kind of not.
Heck, at that point in time, the Big Ten could get the 1, 5, 6, and 7 seeds at that point in time, Trev. You know?
Another buy-sell hold from D-Troll Hunter. Boise State is on upset alert versus San Jose State.
But I'm not saying they're going to get upset, but they are definitely on upset alert. We talked about that the other day, Trev. Boise State is a really good football team. San Jose State is one of those teams that when they get hot, they can score. They got a really good wide receiver. Their quarterback's shaky. But yes, they can get rolling. They can definitely get rolling with Coach Niumatalolo there. That's who's their head coach. Did you know that? Ken Niumatalolo is their head coach.
No kidding.
Yep. But they haven't been playing as well recently. But if they get hot, they can hang with you. They can score a lot of points. I think Boise State wins, but I definitely have them on upset alert against San Jose State. No question.
Sure. Buy, sell, hold. If Georgia loses to Tennessee, they are out of the playoff conversation. If they are not, then LSU shouldn't be either.
Well, I think they are. I mean, like, here's the thing. They're out of the playoff right now. If they lose again, they're way out. So, yeah. I mean, they're done. LSU's done. They're done if they lose to Tennessee. 100%.
Yeah, I agree. Buy, sell, hold. Brian Kelly said in his Monday press conference, the standard at LSU is 10 wins every season. Do we buy, sell, hold that as the standard at a place like LSU?
I buy it when Brian Kelly's the head coach. That's what Brian Kelly does. Lower the standard so he always meets them. That's who he is. Should it be the standard there? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Look, LSU's like, oh, we've won 3. Okay, they've had some anomalies, but overall, I don't think that LSU's Bama. I don't think they're that. They had a generational coach that won their first. Their second one they won with 2 losses, and their third one they struck gold with Joe Burrow. I don't know that that's repeatable. It's kind of like Clemson. Clemson just had that great stretch. It doesn't mean Clemson can be an all-time for the next 30 years team like that, like a Bama could, like an Ohio State could, or whatever. But I mean, I kind of buy that to a degree. When he's the head coach, sure. Should it be where 10 wins and never compete for a championship? Should that be the standard? No. 10 wins with 1 championship every 10 to 12 years? Yeah, that's a fair standard at LSU. I think.
I think that's just such a sad standard to
that's who he is.
Himself. Oh, I know it is. It's just so sad. I mean, your standard is competing for a national championship. Like that's now. If you want to look within that, I mean, I think there's a 10-2 team that goes 10-2 in the regular season that could, right? I mean, we're looking at Alabama right now. They're probably going to end the season 10-2, compete for a national championship, and go play in the playoffs. But like to just say that the standard is 10 wins, like that, like the narrative that produces. Good Lord, Kelly.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
That's who he is.
I miss him.
I don't. That's a fireable offense, Trevor. Like even as a joke. My wife will make me for you if you say that ever again.
I'm side-eyeing the chat right now. I'm waiting for Ange to pop in and say something. That's funny. Oh, that's funny. Buy, sell, hold from D-Troll Hunter. If DJ Lagway plays and is healthy, LSU could be in trouble against Florida this week.
Buy, because if he's healthy, he'll be able to run around. So yeah, buy.
Yeah, definitely buy. LSU has shown that they can't stop mobile quarterbacks against any team.
And they're horrible at it. Like they're horrible at it.
Yeah.
And the difference between DJ Lagway and like Lenore Sanders and Marcel Reed, for example, is he can actually throw and read a defense. Like, it's way better than those two guys.
Yeah.
Way better.
Mm-hmm. Buy, sell, hold from ND Bet. Without adding any transfers, next year's team will be championship competing caliber at every position except quarterback, defensive tackle, and wide receiver.
Sell. I'm not saying Notre Dame's going to be a championship caliber team next year. They're going to be very young, even younger than this year. But it's like this. If Notre Dame can do enough in the regular season to get into the postseason, they could be even more dangerous next year than this year. It's just the question is, will they lose too much early because of how young they're going to be to not get there? But if they sneak into the playoffs somehow next year, or young guys develop faster than you think, they're going to be championship caliber. Because if they're in the playoff, they'll be there. I think at D tackle, I'm cheating a little bit because I'm projecting a portal pickup who I don't know yet. But if you were to say, hey, like you said, without adding any transfers, I can't look at it that way because I know they're going to. You know what I mean? So if I'm going to take your premise the way that it is, I would say buy. I'd say sell, buy, sell. I think the receiving core next year, if Mike Brown's the coach, I think he is. I think the receiving core next year is going to be really good. And we've said that for how many years now, but you're going to have Cam Williams kind of going through a whole year. Micah Gilbert plus Jaden Greathouse is going to be a junior. Jordan Faze is going to be junior and hopefully healthy. KK Smith hopefully is a year older and is really ready to do more. You'll have the freshman class coming in. Logan Saldate will be he was shifty when he was running routes against Florida State. He looked quick, like really quick. So
Jaden Thomas might come back.
Jaden Thomas potentially, yeah. And so I would honestly bring Deion Colsey back than go out and get another type of guy like that, like a Bo Collins type. Because since Bo's going to be gone. But yeah, that's where I'm at. So sell, buy, sell. If I can't add transfers, I'll go sell, buy, sell.
Yeah, I'm the same. I am the same. Buy, sell, hold from ND Bet. Notre Dame will make the playoffs even if there's no expansion in 4 of the next 5 years. Next year's defense will be at least as good as this year's, and the offense will be better.
I'm going to hold on that because I need to see health. Like if you tell me, and who's coming, is Benjamin Morrison coming back or not? Is Bubakar Traore going to be 100%? Like, I have a couple questions about that for next year. I think there's certainly, look, you lost a great player in Cam Hart and 2 really good leaders in JD Bertrand and Maris Leofau, especially JD. But if we're being honest, Javonte Jean-Baptiste, nice player. But I think losing Cross, losing Mills, and losing Morrison and losing Xavier Watts is a far bigger loss than last year. Because it was like Cam Hart was like that one elite talent. And like, I'm not at all shocked he's playing really well in the NFL, according to people I talked to. But JD and those guys, they weren't the same kind of athlete. These guys are far more impactful. Like, with all due respect to Javonte, Howard Cross and Riley Mills are far more impactful on just an overall dominance level. Benjamin Morrison's an elite player. Xavier Watts is, look, I know Kyle Hamilton. This is going to piss some of you off. Kyle Hamilton was the freakier player. He made more of the highlight reel plays. He was the better NFL draft prospect, but just play after play after play. Xavier Watts' last 2 years in Notre Dame were better than Kyle Hamilton's last 2 years in Notre Dame. Just snap after snap, just brilliant play. And I don't care what anybody says, no one's going to convince me otherwise. Don't care.
Respect that.
What's your thoughts on that one, Trev?
I think it's tough because I think Notre Dame is going to be better in some areas, and I think they are going to struggle in some others. I think you can only look at the running back room is getting better. Jeremiah Love has to come back. I think Jadarian Price will come back. Jabron Payne is going to come back healthy. Aeneas Williams is going to have another year under his belt. Kedron Williams is going to Kedron Young is going to have another year under his belt. The offensive line is going to be better than what they were. I think there's going to be.
I do think the offense, Trev. I didn't say. I do think
Yeah.
the offense is going to be better for sure. I'm holding
Yeah.
because I don't know about the defense. It's going to be excellent, but I don't know if it's going to be as good as this year's defense. Is what I'm saying.
Yeah, the defense is going to be. I think it's going to be more the same as it was this year. The defense is going to be more athletic than what it was this year. I believe that. I think that the linebackers are going to be better than they were this year because they're just going to have another year of experience. They're going to have another year in the system. I'm going to be interested to see. The defensive line for me is the big question on defense. Secondary is going to take a hit losing Xavier Watts, but there is a chance that Ben Morrison comes back. But even if he doesn't, you're still going to have Christian Gray. You're going to have Leonard Moore, who has all the experience now. You're going to have 2 true freshmen coming in Dallas Golden and Mark Zachary. You're going to have Jadon Blair coming in at safety. You're going to have Adon Schuler with another year of experience under his belt. Defensive line for me, like how good the defense is going to play or how good the defense is going to be is kind of held within the defensive line for me. That's going to be that I think has the most question marks, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to fill the shoes of Riley Mills and Howard Cross? Is Boubacar Traore and Jordan Botelho going to come back the same way? Is Bryce?
I don't think Jordan will, but I hope Boubacar can. But that's the thing, though, Trev. When you have to say that many ifs, you know what I mean? Like, I'm confident that the offense will be better. And again, we're talking about, okay, instead of giving up 11 points per game, they give up 13.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like, we're not talking about they're going to all of a sudden become mediocre again and get back to giving up 19, 20 points a game. I don't know if they're going to be as good as this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
The part about for the next 5-year playoff, I buy that. I definitely buy that. There's going to be a year in there where they're like 13th and don't make it, you know, because for whatever reason, schedule, injury, whatever. But for the next 5 years, that's my expectations.
Yeah. Could have dropped a bad loss, or maybe you were already a bubble team and a team that you beat earlier in the year that you thought was going to be better. You know, who knows? Who knows?
Yep.
Buy, sell, hold. No team we could face in the playoffs would be a 7-point favorite on a neutral field.
Sell that. They'll have somebody like, look, Notre Dame is always gets funky odds, I've found, against when they play SEC teams. I mean, they were in the top 10 and A&M was barely top 25 and Notre Dame was a 2.5-point underdog on the road. If Notre Dame somehow played Georgia or Bama or Ole Miss or on a neutral field, they'd probably be close to a 7-point underdog. I think so. Now, I'm not saying that those teams are that much better. I'm simply going off of history of what we've seen of how those things come out.
Yeah, I agree. I think if they played Ohio State would be 7-point favorites.
Yep.
You know, I don't think Notre Dame's ever beaten Ohio State. So I think that's another one of those teams that would be favored. Buy, sell, hold from Burnout 85. The Irish host a playoff game with a weather advantage, i.e. hosting a Southern team that doesn't like cold weather, and it actually affects the visiting team.
I mean, am I reading that correctly? He's asking if a Southern team visits, it would affect them. Am I reading that correctly, or am I missing that?
No, you got it.
If Notre Dame hosts a Southern team and the weather's what we usually is in December, I think that's advantage Notre Dame, sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Buy that. I buy that. Penn State hosts a playoff game based on their current ranking and remaining schedule. Buy, sell, hold.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they're gonna win ugly, but they're gonna win most likely. You know, barring upset. So. And I don't see them. I mean, I could see them falling behind Notre Dame, but I don't see them falling away all the way to 9. They're 4 right now. If they, you know what I mean? So, yeah.
I buy that, unfortunately. Buy, sell, hold from Burnout 85. The Irish might be better off traveling for the first round of the playoff based on how locked in they have been while traveling this season.
No, I mean, I get that. I'm not going to dismiss that out of hand. No, I get that. But the teams you're going to be traveling to are going to be better than are not as good as the ones you're going to be playing in the playoff.
Yeah.
You're going to be playing better teams in the playoff than you played in the regular season. With all due respect to Texas A&M, that's just reality. It's also going to be a little different in the playoff because you're going to be, school's going to be getting out that week, and it's just going to be a little bit different. I would much rather play it. Plus the weather aspect of it. You're practicing in the cold. You're walking around in the cold, and then now you got to go down and play in 70-degree weather potentially, or 65-degree. You know what I mean? Like now, I worry more about that weather difference than I did Notre Dame going from 85 in South Bend to 90 in Texas. You know what I mean? Like that's a much bigger gap than the other way around. So.
Yeah, and I'm always going to err on the side of having home field advantage. Like, despite what some people say about Notre Dame Stadium, everything that I heard from the Florida State game, it was a raucous crowd.
It was for a while. Once it became obvious that this team blows and there's a blow, it was more loose after that. But the very beginning, I was outside for that. It was very loud. That first drive, big time.
Yeah, I mean it's tough to have a crowd engaged when you're winning by 49.
Mm-hmm.
So I get it. Buy sell hold from Burnout 85. The Irish players found their offensive identity in the Stanford game. Attack, 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 no matter where they are at in the game.
They started to, I'll say that. I'll put that. They started to. They didn't completely turn the corner. And I don't know that they completely turned the corner probably till the Navy game. But they started to really turn the corner in that game. They were throwing the ball down the field, and they were doing some things, motioning, getting the ball outside, and throwing now screens to Jeremiah Love, throwing post routes to Bo Collins, more RPOs. Like there was a lot more of that. What we're seeing now, that was the game where they started to turn the corner. Yeah, I buy that.
Yeah. I think the Stanford game kind of laid the foundation for where they're at offensively, and they're kind of using that as their benchmark tool of like, hey, like these are some things that we can go to generate some good offense. So yeah, I buy that. Buy, sell, hold from We Are Notre Dame. Notre Dame plays Indiana in the first round if both teams make the playoffs. Notre Dame hosts because they have the bigger home stadium and more tradition, my opinion.
Well, I think Notre Dame I'll buy it that if they both made it, Notre Dame would host because I think Indiana would be a lower seed. I think Notre Dame would be like a 6 and Indiana be 11 or 7 and 10, something like that. So they'd have like a close loss to Ohio State, stay in, and Notre Dame would host them. Yeah. I think in that scenario, I think they would absolutely prefer like that. That's where I'm curious how they're going to be like those late flips, to try to get a team like Notre Dame at home instead of Indiana. I mean, let's be real. I think that's something that will be factored in to some of those things. Hey, let's move Indiana. We like Indiana. Let's keep them in, but let's move them behind Notre Dame because also I think that I could see them also trying to somehow find a way to get Indiana at Notre Dame because then they're going to save a lot of money on travel. You know what I mean? They're not going to have to charter a flight for 150 people. It's, hey, here's bus money. You know what I mean? And it'd just be cheaper that way. So I buy that not for the reason you say, but partly, but more for other reasons.
Yeah. Buy, sell, hold. Deion Sanders' Colorado team makes the playoffs this year.
Sell.
Yeah, I agree. So to be honest, I was talking to a buddy before the show. Colorado is performing better than I thought. Like I did not think they were going to be 7-2.
They're playing good football, Trev. Mm-hmm. They are. This is not a knock like, oh, they suck. They're playing good football. I just don't think they can win 4 more games. I don't think that they can.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
Kansas is starting to kind of figure it out a little bit. They're starting to get healthier, and they're starting to figure things out again.
Buy, sell, hold. When the playoff committee meets and makes changes to the playoffs, the first 2 rounds will be home games.
First of all, I'm buying SMU making the playoffs.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see that.
The previous one. No, it's all good. I hope not. I kind of like the first round, and then after that, I like it being neutral field. I hope not. Yeah. I don't know what they're going to do. I've given up trying to figure the committee out. I hope not.
Yeah.
I hope not.
You. I'm with you. I think SMU makes the playoffs as well. And I really
I watch. I mean, you don't buy into a team just because they have a couple good games. Like Indiana, I didn't buy into Indiana, but after a while, team starts playing at a certain level. You gotta buy it, right? And with SMU right now, Trevor, I'm looking at it and I'm like, man, they keep winning. They keep winning. They keep beating teams impressively. The Duke game was a little shaky, but outside of that, they've played really good football. They play BC at Virginia, Cal. I mean, that all three would have to be upsets for them to lose. They're going to be they're currently undefeated in the ACC right now, and I think they're a nightmare matchup for Miami. Nightmare matchup for Miami because they can score on Miami, but their defense is not terrible. Like they have a decent defense. It's not great, but it's a decent defense. And I think they can hold. I mean, it would be a high scoring game, but I think they can make stops. I do. I think their defense is better than Miami's defense for sure. But I got SMU. I like SMU this year. I'm a believer now in the Mustangs. I am. I think it also would be such a great story that the team that got the death penalty and went through all they went through is part of the first 12-team playoff. I think that'd be pretty cool. I think it'd be very cool. And Andrew Gilmore asked, is that an elimination game for Miami? Yeah, I think if Miami loses a second game, they would drop out. They're low enough, Trevor, to drop out, in my opinion, because SMU'd leap them. So that they'd have to automatically go down at least one spot. So yeah, I think it would be. Miami hasn't done enough to earn a spot if they lose the ACC title game. Now that they have a regular season loss. If Miami is 12-0 and SMU beat them, then Miami would still be in and should still be in, but not now.
Buy sell hold from Irish fan 11. Notre Dame is the best team, not in the Big Ten or SEC.
Easy buy.
Yeah,
they're better than anybody in the ACC, and they're better than anybody in the Big 12, and they're better than Boise State. So, easy buy.
I think they're better than two of the top 4 teams in the top 5 for the Big Ten.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's an easy buy for me.
We could argue if they're better than Oregon or Ohio State. I'm fine, but they're better than Indiana and Penn State. No, there's no argument there for me.
Correct. Buy, sell, hold from Domer Grizz. I love senior day and often get choked up cheering for some of the great seniors coming out of the tunnel for the last time. Watts this year will be one of them. He has been through so much and worked his butt off to become one of the best safeties in the country. However, buy, sell, hold that the senior day ceremony is a little weird and that the seniors don't get to run out of the tunnel one last time with their team. That true last tunnel moment happened last week.
I don't think it's weird. I think it's sort of like, your graduation moment, right? Like you don't go up to the podium and as a group, right? I mean, you go out there and that's what all this was for. So all this work was for is that moment you get to run out there to your mom and hopefully your mom and dad or whoever and get to share in that moment with your family. Like, hey, we did it. You know what I mean? And and here's the thing is I don't agree. I believe they will all run out of the tunnel one more time in December.
Love that answer. Yeah, I mean, Marcus Freeman has been so big on putting aside self-glory. Like he talked about it a lot when he was talking about Jalen Sneed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he was one of the more veteran linebackers in the room and then basically accepted his role until the Navy game and then kind of had his breakout moment there in the second half of the Navy game. And I think one reason why they love Senior Day so much is because that is kind of one of the moments where like we can kind of relish and enjoy the self-glory a little bit of like, yo, look what I've done. Like I've gotten us here, like I came from nothing and I'm giving myself the opportunity to play in a playoff team or, I've talked to my parents about this since I was 5 years old. And, I think that's what's really cool. I think that's one thing that's awesome about Senior Day. I do.
All right, let's go to the next one.
Buy, sell, hold from Irish Gordian Knot. USC will finish the season 4-8.
Sell. I don't think they're going to lose their next 2 games. I don't. I mean, USC is struggling right now, and I think Lincoln Riley scapegoated his quarterback. But unless his team revolts against that, Like, look, they've lost games by 3 points, 7 points, 3 points, 1 point, and 5 points. And they've been a pretty good team at home. I mean, at home, they blew out Utah State, had a great comeback, and ended up blowing out Wisconsin, took number 4 Penn State to overtime, blew out Rutgers. I think they're going to beat Nebraska at home, and I think they're going to beat UCLA on the road, although I'm not as locked into that because they've struggled away from home. But away from home for them so far has been like Ann Arbor, Michigan. You know what I mean? Minneapolis, Minnesota, College Park, Maryland, Seattle, Washington. It's not across the city in LA, in Pasadena. You know what I mean? So no, I think they win at least one game, if not 2 more. I think they win at least one more game. Like, yes, they've lost. They're 4-5, but they've been in they've had a lead, Trevor, in all 5 games they've lost. It's like that Notre Dame team in 2016, right? That, with the exception of Michigan State, they were in every game for at least until halftime. Michigan State and maybe USC. But, yeah, that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I mean, it's why the computers are so high on them.
Right,
I mean,
exactly.
Yeah. So USC is not having the season that they were expected to have, but it's still a good football team. I mean, it's one that Notre Dame fans shouldn't overlook. It's one that we won't overlook here at Irish Breakdown. They're still a good football team. They just have some holes.
Absolutely.
Buy, sell, hold from Irish Catholic. Notre Dame has a 1 in 20 chance of winning the national championship this season.
So, Trevor, I'm not good with odds. What does that mean? I don't bet. I don't look at like what would that make them? Like, is that good odds, not good odds?
I think that makes them like plus 2,000 odds to win the national championship. To be honest with you, I'm not 100% sure because it's not like there's more than 20 teams that make the playoffs.
So it'd be
or less than 20. I think it's plus 2,000 odds to make the playoffs. Let me look.
So I see this thing 4, 5, 6, 7. I mean, I see this thing right here that says they're behind Penn State. No, I don't. I mean, I think Notre Dame has one of the, whatever that would be. Notre Dame has one of the 5 as of right now, right? One of the 5 to 6 best odds to win a championship.
Sure.
Whatever that would be.
I don't know what those odds would be. I would have to go and I would have to look and see what that would look like for them. Yeah, I mean, right now to win the college football playoff, Notre Dame is plus 2,000 odds, Penn State's plus 1,800 odds, Alabama's plus 1,000 odds. Ohio State is still the favorite at plus 320.
Mm-hmm.
So
who is Ohio
I'm
State?
Not a
Ohio State is?
Yeah, Ohio State's
wild
the
is
favorite.
I don't really know who I would consider the favorite right now.
I don't think
it's going to be, yeah.
Well, I mean, obviously there is one from.
There's a betting odd, but I mean, if we're talking football, I don't know who that would be right now. I think that team might emerge over the next month.
Yeah, Mm-hmm. Buy, sell, hold from Riker Ferg. Big 10 18 is lobbying the college football playoff committee.
I don't have any evidence of it, and I don't like making accusations I don't have any evidence of, but I don't think they need to. I think the lobbying was to get the guys on the committee, right? I mean, get your plants in there. Don't have them try to bribe people already in there. Just get them in themselves. Put your spies inside kind of thing. You know what I mean? So
sure,
I'll sell that because I think that I mean, they don't need to. You got a Michigan AD as your committee chair. Already doing it.
Having an active athletic director as a committee chair is kind of crazy.
It's ridiculous.
That's wild. I did not. Yeah. I knew that it was an athletic director from Michigan. I didn't know that it was the current athletic director at Michigan.
Yeah.
That's wild. Buy, sell, hold from Riker Ferg. Brian Kelly taking ownership of the LSU program is like Richard Nixon taking ownership of Watergate.
Bye.
Buy, sell, hold.
Not touching that one. I'm just buying it.
Buy, sell, hold from Riker Ferg. Oregon will be the only Big Ten team at the end of the regular season that will be undefeated.
Yeah, because I have Ohio State beating Indiana. My prediction at the beginning of the year is that nobody finishes the regular season undefeated, and I'm going to be off by, I think, one team.
Yeah,
I do think BYU is going to drop a game. I do. I think they
Yeah.
still win the Big 12 or at least play in it, but I think they drop a game.
Sure.
But I don't see Oregon losing their final 2 games.
No, I don't.
I think we won't have anybody undefeated in the playoffs, so I may be kind of right about that. But I believe my initial prediction was no one at the end of the regular season. And I'll be off by 1, in my opinion. At the most, I'll be off 2. I don't think Indiana beats Ohio State. So a friend of mine asked me, and we'll have to talk about this at another time, Trevor, but he says, what would the committee do to Penn State if Indiana blows out Ohio State? You have to drop them both down.
I mean, you'd think, but they'd probably move Penn State to 2nd. I don't know.
Oh, that's good. They'd at least be 3rd. They'd at least put Indiana ahead of them. It'd be number 1 Oregon, number 2 Indiana, number 3 Penn State.
Yep. Buy, sell, hold for Maiden Benami. Notre Dame gets a commitment from Madden, Owusu Boateng, Parham, Meadows, and Wiggins, all of them.
Sell.
Buy, sell, hold. Maiden Benami. You would want to keep Marcus Freeman if he went 1-9 so far this year.
Sell. Gotta go. Not acceptable. Not acceptable. Not acceptable.
Yeah.
Gotta go.
Definite sell.
And Notre Dame can afford it, unlike some of the state schools. Notre Dame can afford it.
Buy, sell, hold. Colorado will be below 500 next year once Shedeur and Travis leave.
And Dion. Buy.
Yeah.
I think Dion goes with them. I've said that before.
I agree.
I would love to be wrong about that. I think Dion would be such a better coach if he didn't have any of his kids on the team.
And just focus on ball.
And just be a coach. Like if he commit, I'm going to commit to this Colorado thing. Yeah. Or even if he left for Florida, wherever. I think he'd be a much better coach if one of his kids weren't on the team.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, Colorado last year was under 500 with Shedeur and Travis. So,
right. But he inherited a terrible situation. Like they're not the only reason that they're above 500. They're the primary, but he's brought in a lot of talent. I'm just worried if he leaves like we think they are, Trevor, all those kids are going to go.
Yeah.
Like their program's going to, and that's where I think Dion's going to leave Colorado if he leaves this year in worse shape than he found it. Because they won't even have still those bad kids to build around. They're all going to go. I think that program gets raided if he leaves after this year.
Yeah, I think so too. Buy, sell, hold. Riley Leonard's passing yards won't increase by more than 10 yards, but that won't matter for our success.
Well, if you're talking regular season, I could buy that, but I do think that Notre Dame's going to have to throw the ball a little bit more effectively in the postseason if they're going to make the run that we think that they're capable of making. I don't know if you agree with that, Trevor, but like right now they're able to out athlete teams in a way that is impressive. You're not going to be able to do that. If for 4 games in the postseason. I just don't think you're going to be able to do that. The other part too is I think you could add 10 yards to his average at the end of the year. I think he's going to have at least one big passing game still the next 3 weeks. Like 270, 280, something like that. I do.
I hope he does.
If he hits 3 throws that he missed on Saturday, he's there. That he just whiffed on. You know what I mean? Like that's where I guess where I come down on it. You know?
Yeah. I mean? No, I can hear that. I think with my issue with Riley Leonard and getting that many passing yards, like it's that conversation for me is there's a lot of different factors in it. One, I don't know how many games he's going to finish. I think their style of offense doesn't. And I feel like just after every game, it's always, well, if that wasn't called DPI and it was a catch, and if that was a catch, or if he made that throw, and it's like, well, like week over week, the conversation is like, it's a lot of ifs around that. But then at the same time, it's the conversation around, earlier in the season, so Riley Leonard's not going to be able to play this way if they want to beat, Louisville. It's like, well, they kind of played that way and they beat Louisville. It's like, Riley Leonard's not going to, Notre Dame's not going to beat, Georgia Tech if they play this way. They're not going to be able to beat Navy if he plays this way. And it's like, well, he kind of has played the exact same. He's gotten better, but he hasn't turned into this Joe Burrow, CJ Stroud pocket.
I mean, there's a lot of room in between those two. Let me say this too. If Riley just averages the next 3 games what he's averaged the last 4 games, he jumps up to 183, which is an 8-point jump. So I'm not saying he needs to go out there and throw for 350 yards every game to have a 10-point increase. If he simply just does what he's done the last 4 games, and that includes Trevor, of the last 4 games, 3 of those he didn't play in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Like he threw for 215 on Saturday and had 2 drops and several. If just the 2 balls that get dropped don't get dropped, that's another 40 yards onto his total, right? And that gets him up because he's only averaging 175. We're not talking about like he needs to average 250. And so if he just repeats what he's done the last month, he goes up to 183. So he only needs that one game that's 250 or 260 instead of 220. That puts him up there. So I understand where you're coming from, and I don't think he's going to turn into Jimmy Clausen all of a sudden. But I think to go from 175 to 185, I don't think it's that big of a difference. It's just a little bit better than what you're doing right now.
Sure.
So we'll see. I do know one thing. I think we both hope that I'm right, because I do think they're a much more dangerous team if he starts throwing the ball more effectively.
I mean, yeah, I'm not going to be upset if that happens for sure. I
don't want him to throw better.
No. Like I'm not going to sacrifice Notre Dame being bad or not winning games for me to be right. But I just we're
you're
10
not
games
saying
in.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, dude. You're good. Like, keep waiting on that. This is the game. Yeah, no, I get it.
Like he's faced a bunch of really bad defenses, and it's still
Yeah.
Buy sell hold from Poe Welch 84. Penn State loses 1 more game this year.
I'm hope buying that one.
Sure.
You know why I'm hope buying it? Because if they got upset by like Minnesota by a field goal, I think the committee would keep them in the top 12. I do. And I think that would put them like 10 or 11, which would put them right in the ballpark to play Notre Dame in South Bend.
Yeah.
And that would make me a very happy person.
At this point, I've already just I've licked my wounds, and I've accepted the fact that Penn State's just going to make the playoffs this year, even though like they don't really deserve to, but it is what it is. And now I just hope that they make the playoffs and play Notre Dame. And at this point, I don't care where it is. I don't care if it's at if it's in round 2 at a neutral field. I don't care if it's at, Beaver Stadium with their illustrious whiteout. I don't care if it's at Notre Dame Stadium. I just hope they play.
That's because you're being selfish. You don't have to actually travel to State College, Pennsylvania, like I would have to travel to, and I've been there. It's a freaking hard trip. It's not a fun trip to get to.
Well, fair
selfish, Trevor. Very, very selfish.
You know me, man. You know me. Oh, man. Buy sell hold from Poe Welch 84. Thomas Davis isn't the last 2026 recruit to commit this month.
Buy
sell hold from Z-Man 381. If Riley Leonard had an extra season of eligibility, Notre Dame would be the favorite to win the national championship in 2025.
Oh, I'd buy that. I mean, Of course, they got to finish this season strong, but I could buy that. Yeah, I could buy that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would too. I mean, it'd be the first time that Notre Dame had a returning starting quarterback since Ian Book.
I mean, dude, I said this. I said in 2022, if Jack Cohn would have returned, Notre Dame wouldn't have lost a game. Maybe the Ohio State game. Maybe. That's the only one like that you could even think about. They would have crushed Marshall if Jack Cohn was starting quarterback. They would have crushed Stanford if Jack Cohn was starting quarterback. Like that. Yeah.
Buy, sell, hold from Z-Man 381. Even if Riley Leonard had an extra season of eligibility, Notre Dame would be better off as a program if he went pro.
I don't know how I feel about that one. I feel like it's almost insulting to say, oh yeah, they're better off when he leaves, especially since we just got done saying that if he returns, they're the favorite to win the national championship. I don't know how you're not better as a program to go out and win a championship. You know what I mean? Like, so no, I'm going to sell that. Is it better for the future long road of quarterback development if he doesn't come back? Sure. It's better for CJ and Kenny to get a shot to play. It's better for that room if Riley doesn't come back. Is it better for the team and the program? No, it's the best thing for the program is what? It's not to develop your own quarterback. It's to win a freaking championship, right? I mean, that's the biggest thing for your program. And, that would be great if that happened. But at the end of the day, it can't happen because he's literally played. I mean, there's no waiver he can accept. He didn't have an injury that cost him. He played 7-8 games last year. There's no waiver he can go with. He's played 4 years. He's done. So, no, the best thing for the program is for them to have whatever gives them the best chance to win a championship next season. And I would love to see Riley, because if you think about it, Trev, if Riley came back, he'd finally get that O-line that he was supposed to play behind. He'd have the same backfield, a lot of the same receivers of the young guys,
Yep.
Yeah.
Another year of chemistry with the receivers. Look, I'm always going to err on the side of bringing back a guy that has almost 2,200 total yards of offense, 22 total touchdowns, and 3 interceptions through 9 games.
And it's probably the second most dynamic running quarterback in college football.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't think it would be a detriment to the program if he came back.
Yeah, I agree.
Buy, sell, hold again from Z-Man 381. If Notre Dame makes a strength and conditioning change in 2025, major injuries this year will be the prevailing factor.
Yeah, if they made a change, that would be the reason why. I'll buy that. I have heard nothing that makes me think they're going to make a change. So, but just looking strictly at the premise of what you're saying, I buy that. That would be the reason why. Unless Lauren Landau just misses the NFL. That would be the only other reason.
Yeah, I mean, injuries are always tough because I know the first person you want to look at is a strength and conditioning coach, but some of the injuries, you just can't help. Like an offensive lineman getting rolled up on, that has nothing to do with strength and conditioning.
Right.
You know,
some of the other stuff now, that's a little bit different. What the heck happened there?
I don't know.
That was weird.
Back like we never left.
Yeah.
Buy, sell, hold, Z-Man 381. Assuming that Notre Dame makes the playoff and gets to a semifinal game and doesn't lose in a blowout, Marcus Freeman will have the program in a better position as a combination of success achieved and future preparedness than Brian Kelly ever did.
Trevor, if they win a first-round game and don't get blown out in the quarterfinals, he has Notre Dame further along than what Brian Kelly ever did, because Brian Kelly never won a game like that, ever. He never won a postseason game that mattered. I mean, the best win, beating a 8-5 LSU team, in a Music City Bowl or the Camping World Bowl. You know what I mean? What's the biggest? Here's who Brian Kelly beat in the postseason. A Miami team that had fired their coach. So you played an interim coach, right? So that's who you played in 2010. In 2011, you played and got beat by a Florida State team that was ranked 25th coming in that game and went 9-4 and started 3 true freshmen on their offensive line. They were 8-4 coming into that game and ranked 23rd, I think, right? And then the 25th, and they went up 23rd. The next year, you got blown out by Alabama. The next year, you played Rutgers in the Pinstripe Bowl and beat them 29-16. A team that was 6-6 coming into that game. 2014, it was a great win. I don't want to take away from the greatness of the win because you needed that and you needed to end the season well. But LSU was ranked 23rd and was 8-4. That was not a very good team. So, 2015, you lost to Ohio State. 2016, you had a disaster season. You didn't make the playoff. 2017, you had your best bowl victory. You beat number 17 LSU, a team that was 9-3 at the time. And also that season had lost by 30 at Mississippi State and lost to Troy. That's the great win you had, a team that had lost at home to Troy. That's your best postseason win. 2018, you got smacked by Clemson. 2019, you beat a very mediocre Iowa State team in the Camping World Bowl. An Iowa State team that was 7-5, and you had no business playing a team that bad. 2020, he got smacked by Alabama again, and then he left after 2021. So if Brian Kelly won a college football playoff game against a top 12 team, that literally would be better than anything Brian Kelly ever did in the postseason his entire 12 years. It's not even a debate. Then we have to get to the semis. And then all the other stuff is true as well. Success achieved and future preparedness. 100%. Like easy buy.
I mean, for me, he just has to win all playoff game.
That's what I'm saying. Like
it doesn't even have to like.
I do feel like if they go into the second round and get blown out by an ACC team or a Big 12 team, that kind of, you beat the number 11 seed at home. You know what I mean? Like, I get your point. I do think it. Don't you think it does need to at least be competitive in that second round, that quarterfinal game?
I think the reason why I'm dismissing it is because, like, I just don't think that a Marcus Freeman-led team is going to get destroyed like a Brian Kelly postseason team did. I don't.
The worst blowout he's had so far is what? 13 points to Louisville?
Yeah.
You lost to Ohio State by 11, Marshall by 5, 6. You lost to Stanford by 2, USC by 11, Ohio State by 2, 3 last year. You lost to Louisville by 13. You lost to Clemson by, 8? And then this year you lost to Northern Illinois by 2. So, yeah.
Like I said, I think the days of Notre Dame going and playing in it, even if Notre Dame gets to the semifinals and they have to go and play like an Oregon, I think the days of losing, 49-14 are just.
If they get handled, it's like 34-20. Yeah. It'd look a lot like the Fiesta Bowl against Ohio State. It would look more like that than Bama, Clemson.
Agreed.
Not Ohio State 2015. Ohio State 2005 is what I meant to say. The 34-20 game where Notre Dame battled, but Ohio State was just better than they were and ended up pulling away and winning by 14. You know what I mean? They had a big lead or comfortably. Notre Dame battled back, and the Fiesta Bowl with Brady Quinn is that's the
Darius Walker had 3 rushing touchdowns that game. Oh yeah. I remember that. By the way, that was a catch by Anthony Gonzalez. It just was,
and it was a fumble. Yep,
sure
and
was.
Sibby should have returned it. Yep,
100%. But yep. Buy sell hold from Joe Allen 72. Minnesota is the only hope for the rest of us sane people to show that Penn State is not that good.
Hey, sort of Purdue. Purdue doesn't have to beat Penn State to show that they're not that good. Purdue just has to play them for 4 quarters.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, I'd say probably so. I don't think Maryland is a very good team. I don't know that Maryland's had a couple games where they were competitive and looked good, but then they've also had some games where they just look terrible. And so, yeah, I don't think they're going to be able to play with Penn State. And I think that's a game where Penn State knows we got to win this game to get a playoff spot. I think you'll get the best version of Penn State in that game, in my opinion. Although I would love to be wrong.
Yeah, me too. The last hope is when Notre Dame plays them in the playoffs. And they can look at that and say, and the narrative for Penn State can be what they were for Notre Dame when they would get blown out in the postseason. Oh, you wasted a postseason slot on them. Yeah, well.
That's right.
Buy, sell, hold. Tennessee's defense shows the world that Georgia's offense has more holes than Swiss cheese.
I buy that because I think that can be true and Georgia still win.
Yeah.
I think Georgia will win that game, but I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. I don't think Georgia's going to move the ball on Tennessee all that well. I think it'll be like a 20-13 type of game, 20-17 type of game. Yeah.
I'm going to sell it for the sole purpose that I think other teams have already shown that Georgia's offense has more holes than Swiss cheese.
Yeah.
You know?
That's a good point. It's a good point. It's a good point. So you're saying it's a sell because it's already been done? I like it. I dig that. Yeah. I dig that, Trev. You're on fire today, dude. I'm digging it.
Hey, man.
I'm digging it.
Came to play. I love buy, sell, hold.
Yep. And Joe Allen, that is the last question for us, man. So we made it, Trevor. We made it. We got done before 5 o'clock. We got done before IB Nation Sports Talk. Super excited about that. We did it, Trev. We got through all the buy, sell, hold submissions.
Look at us.
So let's make sure we don't have any super chats. We do have a couple super chats. Let's get to. We did have the one from Cole Sebring we brought up earlier. Thank you, Cole. We had the one from Gary L. we brought up. Thank you again, Gary. And then we have a super chat here from Michael S. Here. We'll wrap up with that one, Trev.
Good deal. Well, thank you, Michael. Memories of 2015 final games, low performances, and loss keep me from feeling confident about this year's closing. What are your thoughts?
Look, I think the nature of college football this season is what makes me not get too confident they're just going to, like, when we talk about what they can do, we're saying what they're capable of doing. Guys, we've said this. Notre Dame's going to have to play well to blow out Army. They're going to have to play. Notre Dame has not beaten USC, like blown USC out in the Coliseum since 2000. Like every other game's been competitive, to some degree competitive. Before that, the last blowout one they had was back in 1988. And those were like 17-point wins. No, even 2012 was a close game. 2018 was a close game. They won by 14, but remember, they had that Tony Jones swing route late in the game to make it 14. It was a close that put the game away. But so it's not that we're overlooking those teams. It's just we're talking about what Notre Dame's capable of. We'll find out what they are. We don't know the answer to that. But the reality too, Michael, is that we can't keep holding this team because it's a very different team than teams past. And once a team, we say, once a team shows you who they are, believe them. Well, that was true early in the season for what they did, but we're now talking about a 7-game win streak. This is too beyond anything Marcus Freeman's ever done. They keep getting better and better each week. They're not just like scraping by like the 2021 team and the 2019 team where they're just kind of blowing out bad teams and then kind of barely getting by Virginia Tech at home in 2019. You remember that? Where you needed that the fumble at the end of the game or the drive at the end of the game for me and Book to win that one. And, like that's not who this team has been. So maybe it comes back, sure, but I just refuse. Here's the thing for me, Michael, with everything that's kind of happened in my life recently and just trying to change how I view life, I've just refused to focus on the negativity of things. I refuse to not enjoy the present because of what may come down. Now I can prepare for it, but I don't need to dwell on it. So, playing 2015 final games, low performance. I mean, in 2015, the final games, low performance of 2015 was they lost to Stanford, who was a top 5 team, and lost to Ohio State, who was a top 5 team, and they lost to Clemson, who was a top 5. They don't have any top 5 teams left on their schedule, man, in the regular season. So I just refuse to nowadays to focus on the negative of what may happen. I'm just going to enjoy the ride. And if the ride comes to an end, then I'll talk about why. And we'll discuss why, and we'll talk about what needs to get better. But I refuse to prevent myself from being able to enjoy what we're seeing right now. Like, do y'all understand? We're seeing historic things from Notre Dame right now. Things we haven't seen in decades. And I'm not going to not enjoy that because of what may happen or what happened under a previous coach or even in the past under Freeman, including Northern Illinois this year. If it happens again, then we'll deal with it at the time. But you know what? Man, life's too short to live in misery of, well, I don't want to get excited because this may happen. You know what? Then deal with the heartache when it comes. But don't miss out on all the joy you can have in the meantime. That's how I'm going to live my life. And so, Michael, this is the great thing about this country. The veterans we celebrated on Monday fought so that you can be as pessimistic as you want to be. Talking about sports, because at the end of the day, it's sort of trivial. You know what I mean? And I'm going to enjoy this, man. I am. And Michael, I used to be like you. Always thinking about what may be, what could happen. But, like with what's going on in my life recently, you know what? I'm not going to live that way anymore. I'm going to try not to. I'm going to live it one day at a time. And right now I'm watching a really fun Notre Dame football team to watch. I'm going to enjoy it until they stop being fun to watch. And then we'll talk about it and we'll break it down. It doesn't mean we're going to just say everything is awesome. We point to things they got to do better and all that stuff. But you know what? I'm going to enjoy this. And I'm not going to live in fear because of what happened in 2015 or what happened in 2022 or what happened in 2017 or what happened under Bob Davie or Tyler or anybody else. I'm going to enjoy this. That's just what I'm going to do. And, when I'm done with this, I'm going to go enjoy spending a little bit of time with my wife, and I'm going to enjoy getting some work done tonight. And I'm going to enjoy getting on tonight with I'm going to be on with Mark tonight. So it just enjoy the ride, man. It's like, what's the point of getting on a roller coaster if you're going to put headphones on and close your eyes? What's the whole point? Enjoy the ride. Sometimes it goes down. Sometimes it can be scary. But live in the moment, man. That's you want to know my thoughts are? You ask me my thoughts. That's my thoughts. Enjoy the moment. Enjoy this team while it's playing the way that it is. And then when they stop playing the way that it is, we can discuss it then. We can embrace it then. We can talk about it then. We can break it down then. You know what I mean? And so that's where I'm at, man. Mark Rogers is who I'm talking about, guys. I want to be on with Mark tonight on his channel. So that's my thoughts to that, Michael. Just don't be so afraid of what may be or what was to not enjoy what is. I'm done.
Well, I can't really take out a show better than that. So, ditto. No, that was solid. I agree with you 100%. I agree with you 100%. So, not much more to add there, Brian. That was solid.
Thank you, Sherry. I appreciate that. And thank you too, Trevor. Why don't you go ahead and take us out of here, man?
Yep, you got it. Well, hey, listen, guys, really great submissions today on Buy, Sell, Hold. Brian and I always have fun talking to you guys about all of the awesome submissions that you have. Had a fun conversation earlier today about the landscape of the college football playoff. We will be back tomorrow at 1 o'clock to talk through keys to victory for the Notre Dame Virginia game. Around 2:15, you're going to be on with Bill Bender, correct? Talking about the full slate of college football.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. So in order to stay in the now and know what all is going on with us here at Irish Breakdown, make sure to hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and share this podcast with your friends, family, coworkers, whoever you know that's interested and loves Notre Dame as much as you do. Make sure to share this podcast with them on any streaming platform that you guys listen to us on. And as always, be sure to subscribe with us at boards.irishbreakdown.com for all of the in-depth intel pieces that we have coming out every day. But until tomorrow, I'm Trev. That's Brian. And we will see you guys tomorrow on the Irish Breakdown podcast.